I want to welcome everyone to the Planning Commission meeting. Where'd our attorney go? She quit already? Didn't introduce her. Where? She'll be back. Okay. Brenda's any changes to the agenda?
There's a revised agenda at your place. A new item number 8 has been added under other business.
Okay. Is there a motion to accept the agenda?
So moved.
Okay. All in favor? Aye. Any opposed? Agenda has now been adopted. Need approval of the March 22nd meetings minutes, and if there's any corrections or additions, need to know those now. Is there a motion to accept?
So moved. Second.
Motion second to approve the minutes of March 22nd, 2012. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Those minutes are now official. Councilman Todd, would you like to speak now, or you want to wait? Okay.
Thank you, Chairman McLean and other commissioners of the Planning Commission. I'm Carter Todd. I'm the council person for District 34, which is the southern half of Green Hills and Forest Hills and the southern portion of Oak Hill. I'm here before you this afternoon to speak about item number 3 on your agenda, which is the proposed Voce project on Granny White Pike. Let me begin by saying I've been on the Metro Council 5 years, and this is probably the most difficult matter that I've had to come before me in my 5 years on the council. I haven't done a detailed poll of the people that live out there, but just you kind of get a sense as a council person, and several of you all know this, by the email volume that comes in, that I can pretty much tell you, I'm sure that the majority of the folks that live around this development are against it. And I think if I lived next to this property, I would probably be against it also. This is one of the last large tracts of land left in that portion of Davidson County. It's about 60 acres. And interestingly, it's a tiny little piece of metro between the city of Forest Hills and the city of Oak Hill. So it's kind of right there. It's not Oak Hill and it's not Forest Hills, it's metro. And the homes around this property are all clearly upscale homes, and the neighbors have, kind of in a sense, for the last significant period of time, had a beautiful park right next door to them. So, I mean, I'd love to live next to this beautiful park. But the fact of the matter is that this land is zoned RS40, and the owner is entitled to build homes on it. And using the cluster lot option, the planning department says in its report that they could build approximately 56 homes on this piece of property. So without any new legislation in front of the Metro Council, 56 homes could be built on this property, which means additional traffic on Granny White Pike, additional stormwater runoff, additional noise, and additional development right next to all these nice homes. When I ran for the Metro Council, I said that I would always try to do what the majority of my constituents wanted me to do, and I meant that. But this may be a case where you got to look and do some balancing and do some due diligence. And I think you're going to have to decide, is it better to tell them to build on this RS40 and do it that way, or is it better to do it with the SP zoning? As part of my due diligence on this, I sat down with Terry Cobb, who is the mayor's he's got a director of development now, the new office, and reviewed the plans with Terry Cobb. And he believed that the SP development was more environmentally friendly because it kept a lot of the mature trees on the property. It allowed the natural drainage ways to be utilized as an alternative to piping, and the plan included a detailed system of sidewalks and paths and bikeways and other pedestrian-friendly ways of creating a walkable community. It left large buffers around the property. One of the things you're going to hear a lot of people speak out against this today, they're going to refer back to the May 2010 floods and how many landslides the city of Forest Hills had. And I had my properties and my issues in other parts of town, but there were huge issues in Forest Hills with landslides. And part of the reason there were so many landslides in the May 2010 floods is we didn't, SP is relatively new. In the old days, you had to build according to what you had. And so if you drive around Forest Hills, you'll see homes that are built in places they never should have been built. And on this piece of property, if we can do the SP, if they can do the SP, I think you'll see the homes kind of built down more, and the dangerous spots you won't build homes in. And I think, if I were their lawyer, the opposition's lawyer, I'd tell them, as part of my strategy, defeat the SP, make them build on the RS-40, and as a practical matter, they may not be able to build up in some of these places because they are steep slopes with, colluvial soils and things like that. So that's an issue, but I think that's why the SP is the better solution here. I do have two large constituents in my district I want to mention briefly. One of them is Vanderbilt University. Vanderbilt owns the Dyer Observatory, and they have kind of said they're not for it or against it, but just recently they've kind of come out with qualified support if the developers will add, as part of the SP, some restrictions on more environmentally friendly lights that point down and help them preserve dark sky and help their observatory. And I think the developers haven't had a chance to do that yet. And I'll get to what my conditions would be if I take this in front of the Metro Council, but that would be something I would require. The other big constituent are the two satellite cities, the city of Oak Hill, which I really haven't heard weigh in yet, and the city of Forest Hills. And I think this morning all of you received a detailed letter from the outside attorney from Forest Hills. It should be in your packet, but it's a really well-written letter. And but the city of Forest Hills has said they're initially somewhat against it, but if one significant change will be made, they could be for it. And then the other changes they mentioned, I think if you go through it in detail, they're kind of already included, I think. So the biggest issue that the city of Forest Hills comes out with, they would just like to see in the phase one a little bit larger lots. And I think that's something we ought to discuss with the developer and the commissioners of Forest Hills. So, but it's interesting if you think of what's the nicest development in Forest Hills. Some people will tell you it's Northumberland, which is on tiny lots. So it's interesting. I think they ought to try to reach a compromise on this, but I wouldn't say it's fatal if they can't get exactly there. The other comments in here are things I think like they should have a southbound left turning lane, and I think Brenda included that in her report. That was one of the conditions that you all had. Other conditions are also on keeping the lights environmentally friendly to keep a dark sky, which Vanderbilt wants, and I think that's something they can do, and they ought to work on that. You're going to hear a lot of speakers, unfortunately, but it's good, and this is where they get to come speak. So, but you're going to hear, I think, one or two things over and over again, and one is there's too much traffic on Granny White Pike, and that will, I think whether you allow this or don't allow this, if they build with the existing zoning rights they have, it's going to increase the traffic. So I would, in my analysis, try to figure out what are the unique things about the SP versus the existing zoning, not what are the arguments against any building at all, because they do have the right to build already. The other thing you'll hear a lot about is the soils, and like I mentioned before, I think this might be a better solution on the soils. Just in closing, I would say that I think most of the people who will speak here today in opposition are never going to be for this. What additional changes they make, they've got a great situation. I don't blame them, but they're not going to be for it. And I think you all are charged with the task of deciding, is this SP zoning better, or tell them to build on the existing zoning. I would respectfully request that you approve the SP zoning. I think on balance, it's better. And as a council person, I'll tell you that I will slow walk this bill through the Metro Council and make them have additional meetings and try to build in the things that Forest Hills asked for, build in the things that Vanderbilt asked for. And, but it's a tough call, but it's a close call. But I think on balance, the SP is better. Thank you.
Thank you. Councilor Johnson.
Thank you, Commissioners. I'm Karen Johnson. I'm the councilperson for District 29. And I want to begin. I know that what you have before you are the recommendations for the process, the plan process review for the Nashboro Village parcels. I would like to express that the most directly affected residents of the Nashboro community vehemently oppose the Site 3 development due to the significant traffic concerns the ingress and egress of the driveways to the narrow road that accommodates both the golf clubhouse and the proposed development. There are significant safety issues with the amount of traffic on this road. I sent you a letter on yesterday, and I want to formally, respectfully request that you defer action so that the community could have the opportunity to speak with the developer regarding their concerns before the commission acts on this review. This will give an opportunity for the community to ask questions and to address any safety concerns before any activity begins, because there may be some things that can still be worked out that are not currently addressed, since there has been a change in who is developing this property from the developer that was originally approved in 2005. I believe that this deferral request is just the right thing to do because it does not change or alter your process in any way. The community would like to also have the opportunity to discuss the staff's recommendation to not change the zoning on the remaining sites that have been recommended as inactive. The concerns that the zoning needs to be changed on the remaining sites to reflect today's issues around infrastructure and density is the issue. Keeping in place a PUD plan from 1979 when there are obvious variables around safety to include pedestrian safety, traffic in the overcrowded area with severe infrastructure issues which have changed over time, I think is not being responsible as a government. 1979 and 2012, there are a lot of changes that have occurred since that time. What was good then is not working now. We need your help, and the only way we can improve the quality of life in our area is if we are listened to as we live and drive through this area daily. We are oversaturated with apartments, and per the Parks Master Plan, that was outlined through your process here at the Planning Commission, a lack of green space and areas where people can safely recreate is a problem. If we have problems in this area, then we don't need to continue to develop the way that it was approved in 1979. Commissioners, you and I serve for the benefit of the people of Davidson County, and we are responsible for following our ordinances for all cases without giving special treatment to one developer over another. I understand the fair housing law is applicable in Site 3. However, my request is not in any way infringing on their rights to have their project. What I'm merely asking can certainly be done within the time frame that is outlined for this process. I'm asking for a deferral on all of these and asking for this as a courtesy that is generally granted to the elected official representing their community for the purpose of having a community meeting so that we can talk through some of the issues and concerns that people have expressed. All of this can occur prior to the deadline in which you as the commission can act on the recommendations from the planning staff. In closing, giving citizens a fair opportunity to have their concerns addressed, again, is the right thing to do. And I know that you will be getting into discussion. You will hear from people in the community. There are a significant number of people here from Nashboro Village today. And there will be some additional questions that I would like to have answered around the traffic study that I initiated. I emailed those questions to each of you, And I would like the opportunity to have another chance to come back up to provide any clarification as we move forward with this discussion. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other councilman in the audience that I've overlooked?
Mr. Chairman, I apologize. I have a question for the council lady. The revised agenda currently shows items 4A, B, C, and D on items for deferral, which doesn't necessarily include Site 3. Is that what are you asking for all sites to be deferred tonight?
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
Can we clarify again, deferred on the deferral agenda, or do you want a public hearing and hearing on 4E?
I
Or you
want
want them
the-
all deferred at outset and not discussed at all?
If possible, I would like to have it all deferred where public input could be provided prior to your 90-day deadline, which I believe is the May 10th date that I specified in the letter.
Okay, is that all right? So do we need to move to put 4E on the deferral
No,
agenda?
no, we've been here.
Good, okay, I didn't know.
Okay.
Thank you.
Our new council person, not council from the council, but our attorney, is Susan Jones. Welcome.
Thank you very much. I appreciate having the opportunity to work with you. Look forward to it.
First lesson, you got to turn your mic on.
It's the black button.
Thank you.
Either that or speak loud.
I'm a fast study, so I appreciate having the opportunity to work with you all. I'm looking forward to it. Thank you.
Okay, Brenda, items for deferral or withdrawal.
We have several items to be deferred. The first item is item 2 on your agenda on page 4. This is a request to amend the Metro Zoning Code to require multifamily developments in certain situations to construct public streets within the development, and the request is to defer indefinitely. The second item on the deferral agenda is item 4A on page 5 of your agenda, and this is a request for the periodic review of a portion of the Nashboro Village planned unit development located at the southeast corner of Nashboro Boulevard and Flintlock Court, which is known as Site 14, and is approved for 144 multifamily units in a two-story building. In two six-story buildings, I'm sorry. And the request is to defer to the May 24th, 2012 Planning Commission meeting. The next item is 4B on your agenda, also on page 5, and it is also a request for a periodic review of a portion of the Nashboro Village. This one is located on the southwest corner of Nashboro Boulevard and Flintlock Court. It's known as Site 15, and it is approved for neighborhood commercial uses. 4C is also on your deferral agenda. Another portion of the Nashboro Village PUD that's under review. This is located at Nashboro Boulevard, unnumbered, approximately 1,500 feet east of Murfreesboro Pike. It is known as Site 27, and it is approved for daycare. And again, deferred to the May 24th, 2012 meeting. And finally, item 4D on page 6 of your agenda, another periodic review request in the Nashboro Village PUD, and this is a portion of property located at 171 Bell Road. It's known as Site 25 and is approved for 100 units in a 5-story building.
Thank you. Items 2, 4A, 4B, 4C, and 4D, the staff has asked for deferral. The owners of the sites 14, 15, 27, and 25, which are items 4A, 4B, 4C, and 4D, have asked for that deferral till May 24th. Is there a motion to accept those for deferral?
I just have a question. If staff could clarify. So the deferrals do not include Site 3 currently?
That's correct.
It's on public hearing. Item 3.
So we'll have a public hearing tonight?
Unless you defer it.
Okay. I thought the council lady was asking us just to defer. Okay.
Go ahead.
There it is. Before we vote on the deferral, I'm assuming that the reason that the Site 3 was not included is that there were reasons not to, and that perhaps the owner...
It's a different owner. They've worked with the owner finding out what work has been done on the Site 3 and determined that is, well, they'll make their presentation. Items 4A, B, C, and D are owned by another entity that have now just come forward and said we would like an opportunity.
So they're in different
to determine
positions in
those.
terms of development?
Yes.
Yeah.
And I assume that the owner of the one that the council lady was speaking about is against deferring at this point, or do they care?
They have done their due diligence and turned in their information to the staff. Staff is making a recommendation, and so it's on public hearing for today.
My question is, however, do they have a strong position against deferring it? So
They do.
Yes, they do.
Yeah, they do.
That's all I
Because
wanted to
if it's deferred, then their building permits are held up and they can't move forward.
And we might defer it after hearing, but we shouldn't defer it as a matter of course.
We need to have a public hearing.
All right, thank you.
So items, I'm asking for approval to defer items 2, 4A, 4B, 4C, and 4D. Motion second to approve. All in favor? Aye. Any opposed? Items on consent, Brenda.
Before I get to the consent agenda, as information for our audience, if you are not satisfied with the decision made by the Planning Commission today, you may appeal the decision by petitioning for a writ of cert with the Davidson County Chancery or Circuit Court. Your appeal must be filed within 60 days of the date of the entry of the Planning Commission's decision. To ensure that your appeal is filed in a timely manner and all procedural requirements have been met, please be advised that you should contact independent legal counsel. And now I'll get to the items on consent, and this is notice to the public in the room. Items on the consent agenda will be voted on at a single time. There will be no individual public hearing, nor will the commission debate these items unless a member of the audience or the commission requests that these items be removed from the consent agenda. The first item on the consent agenda is on page 4 of your agenda. It's item 1. This is a request to amend the Metro Zoning Code to allow microbrewery as permitted by right in the industrial and warehousing distribution district, and the recommendation is to approve. The next item is item 5, which is on page 6 of your agenda. This is a request to revise the preliminary plan and for final site plan approval for a portion of the Seven Springs Commercial PUD located at 330 Seven Springs Way to permit the development of a 7-story office building, a parking garage, and retail uses in 2 buildings. And the recommendation is to approve with conditions. Item 6 is the next item. It's also on page 6 of your agenda, and this is a request for final plat approval to create 3 lots on properties located at 923 and 925 Kirkwood Avenue, and staff recommends approval with conditions. Now, on the other business items on your agenda, item number 7, also on page 6, is an amendment of the adopted leave transfer program for Metro Planning Department non-civil service employees to include sick leave transfer. Item 8, which is on page 7, is a resolution authorizing the expenditure of $40,000 from the Advanced Planning and Research Fund to the Nashville Area MPO to obtain specialized consultant expertise to develop and implement community surveying for the Nashville-Davidson County General Plan update. And the recommendation is to approve, and so was the recommendation for item 7. For item 9 is on page 7 of your agenda, and amendment number 3 to contract number L2268 between the Metropolitan Government of Nashville and Davidson County and PB Americas, Inc. for general planning, and the recommendation is to approve. Item number 10 is amendment 1 to contract number L2672 between the Metropolitan Government and West Inc. for a household travel survey, and the recommendation is to approve. Item number 11 is an employee contract renewal for Brandon Burnett. Again, recommendation to approve. Item number 12 is new employee contracts for Ben Miskelly and Doug Sloan, and the recommendation is to approve. And finally, the capital improvement budget, which is item number 13, April 2012 final, and the recommendation is to approve. That's the end of the consent.
Okay, you've heard the request from staff for items 1, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, and 13 to be approved on consent.
Move approval.
Motion second to approve those items on consent. All in favor? Aye. Any opposed? Those have now been officially approved. For the members of the audience, there'll be 2 items on the public hearing for today. Will be item 3, the Granny White property, and item 4E, which is a site 3 at Nashboro Village. Brenda, before we get started, the opponents, is there ones that want to speak as a group, for the group, rather than individuals? Any,
We've received 4 neighborhood requests to speak. Here comes one right here.
Yeah, here comes one of them, and I'm not going to speak at this point, but I'll try to answer the question. There are several neighborhood groups, I think
4 has been requested.
that have been requested, and then there are certain individuals who are property owners in the neighborhood, and I'm not sure how many of those there are.
And let me just clarify, there's 3 homeowner groups. That would be the High Valley Homeowner Association, the Almond Drive, and the Hounds Run Homeowner Association. And then, I'm sorry, the City of Forest Hills is not a homeowner association, but they are a group that we
They are,
recognize.
and then I think there are 2 or 3 other neighbors that I know of, but there might be more, that are
who are the other
individual property
spokesmen for the other
owners.
groups?
Bill Fresh, Matt Foster.
Richland Woods, Ranger Glenn.
But those, the ones that are speaking for the group, if they would come up, let's
Come on up.
determine who those people are.
For this,
These are for the 4 groups that requested the group speaking this beforehand. This is a recognition of a group speak, and they have 5 minutes. This had to have been applied for before the meeting tonight. There's 4 that we received.
I see 5 people coming up.
They may be
They
splitting the
asked about
time.
the forms that we were asked to fill out prior to coming in here. They said if you wish to speak, you fill out one of those
Right.
forms.
Right.
That's a different group of people. That's
Good.
okay.
Okay.
Okay,
And you're representing which group?
My name is Matt Foster. I represent the city of Forest Hills.
Okay. And you
My
are?
name is Eric Snyder, and I represent Owen Drive. Bill Fresh, High Valley.
So
that's right. That's the 4, right.
And then there
Now-
are some individuals.
If y'all just step over to the side, one of you stay here in the center. Let me go there.
Probably be me.
Would you ask everybody that you're representing then to raise their hand that you're speaking for? If there's anybody in here.
I'm representing I'm speaking for the Hounds Run Homeowners Association.
Okay, how many people from the Hounds Run Homeowner Association are in attendance here? That's who I want to see.
Several.
Okay. Then if you're speaking for them, then they won't be allowed the 2 minutes.
That's not what your rules say.
Beg pardon?
Your rules say a property owner can speak 2 minutes.
Not if they
Doesn't say
can.
that.
They can, but then we can't give you 5 minutes.
That's not what your rules say. I'm speaking for the Hounds Run Homeowners Association, which is an entity. They are individual property owners.
But they
The fact
belong
that-
to that, so
Well, they're-
just a minute. We'll take the determination.
I don't think they prevent someone else from speaking. I don't think the rules do prevent someone else from speaking. Unless the commission can establish its own procedure for holding the public hearing. The rules don't prohibit it. Yeah.
We'll let you know in a minute.
Yeah, and I don't think there might be 1 or 2
Okay.
at the most. We're trying to limit
Yeah,
how long this
when we
goes.
allow somebody to speak 5 minutes, then it just is that they're speaking for a group of people. And
Well, I understand, but some of the issues are different for the individual owners.
they're looking up our procedure now.
I think that's right.
He's looking it up.
They're right. We didn't write them to deny some individual.
I think, Mr. Chairman, what I remember from our discussion is we were hopeful that having a spokesperson for a group would allow for the arguments to be sort of collected and given extra time to be presented in an orderly way. But I don't actually read the rules as prohibiting someone just because they're a member of, if they have something that's not cumulative to say. Now, we don't want to hear cumulative stuff.
Repeat any information.
Would that be a good way to look at it?
And that's what we've instructed them.
Yeah, so they won't be able to repeat, but we
Judy,
can request
turn your
combined.
mic, Judy, turn your mic on and make that statement.
I'm sorry. So understand that when you come, you will not be permitted to repeat any information that has already been stated. You would only be allowed to add any new information. But according to our rules, we can also request combined presentations to establish an alternative time limit.
Okay. So those four entities will be allowed 5 minutes, and then anyone wishing to speak that has other information besides what's been presented, but we don't want to hear about it.
We can accommodate
over and
that.
over again.
We can accommodate that. That's what we had hoped to achieve also, is not a cumulative presentation of the same information over and over again.
We'll see that happens.
So there won't be any rebuttals. I mean, it's not.
But these four gentlemen will be allowed to speak for 5 minutes, and anyone, even though they're being represented by them, if they have additional information that they'd like to give us, if they're repeating what they've said, then we'll call them out of order. So, Brenda?
This is item 3 on your agenda, and this is a request to rezone approximately 61 acres at 5570 Granny White Pike from RS40 to specific plan residential to permit up to 57 residential units. The property is shown in red. Staff is recommending approval with conditions and disapproval without conditions, as well as granting variances to the subdivision regulations for lot frontage and sidewalks. The property is currently zoned RS40, which requires a minimum 40,000 square foot lot and is intended for single-family dwellings. Using the cluster lot option, the lot yield for this property is 56 dwelling units with 15% open space. The proposed SP zoning is to permit 57 residential units. The plan includes approximately 37% open space. The applicant had originally requested 67 units, including 19 townhouse units, but this was reduced to 57 units, and the plan now includes single-family units only. The land use policy is residential low, which is intended for low-density residential development. The predominant development type is single-family homes. The plan is consistent with the policy. The approximately 61-acre site is characterized by steep slopes to the rear, natural drainage ways, and mature trees. The proposed plan includes 57 building lots for single-family residences. The lots range in size from 5,500 square feet to over 100,000 square feet and are laid out in a manner that works with the character of the property to preserve the slopes and many of the mature trees. Under the existing zoning of RS40, a cluster lot subdivision would yield 56 lots. However, as lots could only be reduced to 20,000 square feet, the layout would require more grading and the removal of more vegetation, and the SP will involve less disturbance. The plan shows 2 road connections, one from Granny White Pike to the west, and the second connection to Carly Brook Lane to the northwest. The steep slopes prevent additional connections. There is one driveway serving 2 lots that will connect to Granny White Pike, and all other driveways would connect to the internal street system. There are sidewalks shown on one side of the new streets, and a footpath through the open space areas is planned. The proposal will require a variance from the sidewalk requirements of the subdivision regulations, and the applicant has indicated that rather than constructing the sidewalk on Granny White Pike, an in lieu contribution to the sidewalk fund will be made, and this is permitted under the subdivision regulations. A neighborhood common area is proposed to accommodate play areas and will serve as a gathering area. There is an existing log cabin on the property that is proposed to be moved to the common area. In this slide, I'm showing the plan overlaid on the topography. The lots have been laid out based on the topographic conditions, with the larger lots on steeper slopes. This lot layout will allow many of the mature trees on the site to be preserved. The applicant has worked with Public Works and the Fire Marshal to develop alternative street sections that minimize the grading required. This property also has a special policy area number 13, and this policy requires that non-conventional subdivisions to either include generous open space with sufficient vegetation to minimize the visual impact of the new development, or that the lots abutting the existing development need to be designed to reflect the character and appearance of the adjacent conventional subdivision. This plan includes a vegetated buffer around the entire property, and the applicant has worked with the urban forester to determine the most appropriate plantings to supplement the existing vegetation in this area. To the south, there is a buffer that will range from 30 to 50 feet. And to the north, the applicant has reduced the number of lots, increased the size of the remaining lots, and revised the layout and supplemented the 20-foot vegetated buffer. This is showing the proposed plan in the context of the area with the existing building footprints shown. As the preliminary SP plan plays a similar role to the concept plan for a subdivision, the applicant gave consideration to the subdivision regulations in designing the site plan. Lots on steep slopes are noted as critical lots, and the request for the preliminary SP approval also includes requests for variances to lot frontage and sidewalk requirements. As discussed in the staff report, these requests meet the requirements for a variance. For street frontages, to preserve mature trees and avoid excessive grading, not all lots will front onto a street or open space, and access to these lots will be provided on a shared drive. Again, to preserve mature trees, sidewalks are proposed on one side of the street, and sidewalks are supplemented with a series of walking paths and trails. The findings are that these variances will not be detrimental to the surrounding area, as the proposal is a result of the effort to design a development that is sensitive to the environmental resources of the property. The area is primarily developed, so the conditions for which this variance is being sought are unique to this development. The innovative and sensitive design protects environmental resources and character by reducing grading, and it is consistent with the residential low land use policy and the special policy area number 13. Here's a view of the property along Granny White Pike. The plan includes a buffer ranging from 50 to 100 feet along Granny White Pike, made up of the existing vegetations and supplemental plantings. Public Works has provided a revised condition concerning Granny White Pike. This is before you at your place. And right now, there is a requirement to construct a southbound lane, turning lane on Granny White. But if a revised traffic analysis is submitted to and approved by the Department of Public Works related to this condition, it may be modified or removed, but it would be dependent on the findings of that traffic study and would require Public Works approval. In conclusion, staff recommends approval with conditions, including the revised Public Works condition, disapproval without conditions, and approval of the granting of variances to the subdivision regulations for lot frontages and sidewalks.
The applicant will be allowed 10 minutes for the presentation, and you can keep 2 minutes back for rebuttal if you'd like.
Thank you very much. Thanks for the opportunity to speak.
Do you plan on keeping 2 minutes? I'll put 8 minutes up on the timer.
I was going to request, yes, remaining time. I'm Shannon Pollard, the executor of the estate of Eddie Arnold, a partner in Armistead Arnold Pollard and Eddie Arnold's only grandson. After a short statement, I'll turn this over to the team, but again, I would like to preserve remaining time for rebuttal. I firmly believe the plan before you offers Nashville a fresh, creative, and inspired community that remains in tune with nature and fulfills a need in the current and future marketplace. Over the last 2 years, our team has hosted 6 public meetings with the surrounding neighbors to share our plans and ideas, to gather feedback, and based upon that feedback, we have made multiple changes to finally come before you with a plan that balances what is best for the property and for our neighbors. We have taken our time. Never did I ever consider selling the property to other developers who do not have a personal stake in this land. Instead, I've enlisted the finest design and engineering minds available to take on the greater challenge of doing something on this rare piece of property that has not been done before. The timing for a community like Voce is now, and in order to achieve it, we need the technical creativity afforded by an SP plan, which is a zoning option created specifically for responsible developments of this scope. We sincerely hope you concur with us and allow this change. Thank you very much for your time and consideration. Thank you.
Thank you, Chairman and Commissioners. My name is Dudley Smith, and I'm a native Nashvilleian. I've spent my entire career in the planning, design, and development of community building in this area. Our companies, Land Innovation and CPS Land, have had the good fortune of planning and developing several very successful communities. I'm also a resident of Forest Hills, and my home has a view of this property. Voce is about quality and not quantity. Voce is not trying to compete in the typical Nashville real estate market. It's not trying to offer the 5-to-1 house to lot ratio or bigger means better. across America today, there are millions of unsold large houses the marketplace often refers to today as McMansions. Voce is not trying to create more of the same. If approved, Voce will be an example of a different alternative. It's a low-impact, common-sense approach with goals of protecting as much of the site's natural beauty as possible. Voce will be a pedestrian-oriented with sidewalks, natural trails to promote connectivity, utilizing good, community-oriented design principles. Voce will promote creative expression and freedom in its architecture, utilizing natural exterior building materials, a soft color palette that blends and complements nature rather than competing with it. You can see from this slide that in excess of 90% of this site is wooded. So as community designers and builders, the first thing we looked at is the slopes, the natural drainage ways, and locating over 400 significant trees on the property. We have designed the site plan to respect the site, and which is really different from designing, and we did that in a manner that's completely different than what we usually do, which is designing the roads and the lots first. So it's kind of the antithesis of the normal approach. This image shows by locating and limiting the size of the building envelopes that it's possible to preserve more than 50% of the natural site's beauty and integrity. This organic plan respects the site. Notice how the courtyard villas are clustered around a small central park area with the building envelopes reflecting a size and shape that promotes the care and preservation of the site. Shared driveways will help to minimize the site disturbance. The random and odd building shapes and forms will dictate that this will be anything but cookie cutter. This also translates to the need to place a limit, a cap, on the square footage of many of the houses to preserve the quality of the site. This will drive the typical cost per square foot of these homes in this community higher than the general marketplace. Again, it's about quality and not quantity. We proposed a landscape along Granny White Pike and preserving the existing trees as well as adding additional trees where necessary in a random, natural manner as necessary. As you can see, Voce is a house in the woods. You can see just by the various forms of architecture that we are suggesting and the less manicured lawns, more utilizing a natural environment approach, that this is a different alternative. 100% of our buyers, we've had over 20 people express their interest in the property, and 100% of those are looking and choosing and desiring a more sensible, sustainable site. Thank you.
Good afternoon. My name is Jeff King. I'm an attorney with Stites & Harbison in Nashville, and I represent the applicant. The plan before you has been thoroughly vetted by the planning staff and the relevant metro departments and has been recommended for approval with conditions that are acceptable to the owner. I can appreciate the position of the concerned neighbors. My family and I have lived within 2 miles of this property for over 25 years, and over time have had similar concerns about proposed developments. However, the issues of concern here, traffic, drainage, slopes, colluvial soil, and so on, have been carefully addressed by qualified professionals and have been thoroughly reviewed by the planning staff. Both the concerned neighbors and this commission should be reassured by the conclusions of the planning staff that these issues have been properly addressed by the project team. I would like to use my remaining time to discuss what I think is one of the most important points for the commissioners and the concerned neighbors to keep in mind. The property is currently zoned RS40. As a matter of right, under current zoning, the property can be developed into the cluster lot option, which would yield 56 lots. The owner has the legal right to do this without any rezoning and without the required meetings and public hearing at the city council level. A quick comparison of what the owner could do legally under the cluster option as compared to what the owner is committing to do under this proposed plan will demonstrate that the proposed plan will yield a much better result. The advantages of the specific plan are as follows. More open space. The minimum open space under the cluster lot option is 15%, while the proposed plan commits to 37% of open space. And if you include the protected areas within lots, the open space is well over 50%. Many more trees will be saved under the proposed plan as compared to the cluster lot option. The proposed plan will require significantly less paved roadways, less grading, and less soil disturbance. There are no meaningful differences in the impact on traffic. The SP is far less impactful on drainage and steep slope issues. In conclusion...
Let me warn you, you're into the 2 minutes, so if you want to keep that for rebuttal, then I'd have to cut you off.
All right. In conclusion, if you compare what the owner is willing to commit to under the specific plan versus what he can do under the existing zoning, a fair-minded person should accept that this plan is a far better and more responsible use of the property. Thank you.
Thank you. Well, you got a minute 50. You've got a minute and 50 seconds left for rebuttal. Anyone in the audience wishing to speak in favor, please come to the microphone. Please come to the microphone and give us your name and your address. It's going to be a long meeting, so if you line up 2 or 3 at a time so that you be ready to speak as soon as the next one walks away, it'd help the commissioners get out a little bit earlier tonight.
My name is Edsel Charles, and I live in South Central Davidson County. I'm here to speak on behalf of the project. I have no financial interest in the project, and the developer is not a client. I do, however, do market research in 21 states, and a lot of it's on what the baby boomers want to buy when they go to move down, when they move out of 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9,000 square foot homes. And that market is growing dramatically. In fact, in Nashville, Tennessee, it's about 6% of the market. I have found out about the project, looked it over, and I thought, why would anybody in their right mind do the utter plat where you have to tear up the site? And why would you not put this in where you save the trees and the environment? One of the problems we have, strictly looking at it from the public's point of view, is you can't hardly find any subdivisions where the product that the baby boomers would like to buy and when they move down would accommodate that product. This subdivision will accommodate that product. I think that if you look at what they would have to put there, I'm convinced by other things in other cities that we find it sells for $20 to $40 a square foot above the high-end custom market. This is going to be an expensive home, even though it's not the same size as probably the neighbors. And here's the goal I see with the site. Don't go and put another similar subdivision in there. Put something in like this that's enormously creative, and it'll probably take care of the environment and take care of the trees, and it'll end up to be something you're proud of. Thanks.
Thank you.
Hello, my name is Charlie McClendon, and I've lived and worked in South Nashville area for 22 years. I'm a real estate broker with McClendon Realty, and what I do with my clients typically is either help them buy an existing home that's on the market or help them construct a new custom home. So I'm talking with customers and potential clients on a regular basis, and the thing that I find appealing about this project is that it contains features that my customers are asking for that are in many cases hard to find in this area, such as the maximization of the green space and the pedestrian walkways. My customers and potential clients are looking for a unique setting, and I think that this project provides a very unique setting. They appreciate the creativity of blending several architectural styles, as you've seen in the pictures, such as the traditional, the rustic, and the contemporary that all go together and blend well with nature. So I wanted to express that I'm excited about the possibility of a project like this becoming a reality in Nashville. I think it'll be good for the clients that I work with, and as a result, good for Nashville as well. Thank you.
Hi, my name is Adam Epstein. I live at 3704 Hobbs Road. I live in the district. Councilman Todd's my councilman. I'd like to not see one more neighborhood that basically destroys the site and doesn't decide that there's a better way to do things. I've heard the commission talk time and time again about trying to have sites that are more sensitive to the site, more sensitive to the environment. There's always been this movement in Green Hills and that area about how green are we going to be. This is a chance to do that. When you look at the sites up and down Granny White, you can see what can happen, which is basically tear down all the trees and build 1 acre lots and have large homes. This is a chance for different price points, for different income levels, to all live in the same neighborhood together, and to also have a site that basically disappears after time that won't be noticed. They already have the right to build 57 lots or 56 lots. It isn't a traffic issue one way or the other. Either way, it's going to be developed. I'd love to see this developed in a responsible way that could be a pattern for the future. And that would be great to see, and I hope you guys can support this and make a difference in what South Nashville is going to look like. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Chairman and Commissioners, my name is Jack Smithwick. I live at 1133 Stonewall Jackson Court. My family and I have lived there for 32 years, almost to the day. We've got an acre. I had 23 turkeys in my backyard yesterday. We have a blue heron that visits regularly. In the wintertime, I can walk over the hill to Radnor Lake. My grandsons found deer antlers in the backyard last week. It's an incredibly beautiful area, and those things are very important to me. Now, the second part of it is that I've mowed the grass for most of those 32 years, and we planted more gardens than Cheekwood. Well, in 3 weeks, I turned 69. I don't want to do that anymore, and I realized that I probably won't be able to do that very much more. So the alternatives are a fourplex in Green Hills with 5,000 square feet, or the 17th floor of some downtown condominium or high-rise. One is too big, both are too sterile. Voce is Radnor Lake, but where people actually live. It's environmentally friendly. I mean, it is so well thought out. It'll be a place where I can continue to enjoy all the things I enjoy today, but I'll never have to cut another damn blade of grass in my life. I think it is a wonderful plan. If I were a homeowner in the neighborhood, would I be opposed? Of course I would, because if I had a park next door for all those years, and I do, I wouldn't like it. But if I had the alternative of a scorched earth development or what Voce is planning to be, there'd be no doubt in my mind what I choose. I hope you will approve it. I think it's a wonderful concept for Nashville. I think it's a wonderful concept for the area, and it's certainly a wonderful concept for the hundreds, if not thousands, of Nashvillians who are getting old at the same pace I am. I ask your unanimous approval. Thanks.
My name is Jim Caden. I live in Forest Hills at 4 Windstone. I can see this property from my front yard on the other side of Granny White. If this were adding traffic beyond their entitlements to Granny White Pike, I would not be in favor of this. Granny White Pike is a difficult situation, and all of us who live there understand that. I have also experienced developing in Forest Hills, and specifically in this area. I know the topography to be difficult. I know the topography to be wonderful. giving the developer, who I have known for 15 or 20 years, and I know to be a responsible, respected developer, giving him the flexibility and the opportunity to do the best he can on this land, not increasing density that he's entitled to, I think is the proper way to go. I think they've created an environment that's much more Radnor-like, much more conducive to our neighborhood. It preserves the natural beauty of the area, and I think creates a housing stock that is not so homogeneous with everything else that's there. If you want to see examples of fairly limited planning concepts, you can drive within 300 yards of this site. You can see roads perpendicular to Granny White Pike, and you can see a house on the left and a house on the right and a house on the left and a house on the right. I think this is far more creative and imaginative, and as a neighbor, I'm an advocate. Thank you.
Thank you.
Hello, my name is Jonathan Cummings. I've been on the project on the farm now for almost 30 years. I started when I was a child working for Mr. Arnold, and throughout this whole time, the beauty and the park that they're talking about is where I've actually worked every day. The time and effort that these gentlemen have put into making sure that this is going to be a beautiful project, and the slow, steady path that they're going. I'm very excited with the way they're handling that. It's not a big jump to do. They're taking everyone into consideration. Having a park right next door like Radnor Lake is just wonderful. I know I did my Eagle Scout project there as well, so I feel as if I know that place as well. I just think that this is just a wonderful project, and I think that Mr. Arnold, me talking to him on a daily basis for my whole life, that the whole key is to save the property, save the trees. I worked on many projects with him since he was such a landowner, large landowner here in Davidson County, and he was always just real soft on this land. And that's what he told Shannon and I, that when this did take place, to take this soft as we could, and that's what has been laid out, and I think it's going to be the best project that they could actually put together. Thank you.
Thank you.
My name is Steve Gondorellis. First of all, thank you guys for serving. Appreciate it very much. I'm a Nashville native. I went to Glendale. I graduated from Overton, and I grew up in Oak Hill. I founded Keller Williams 10 years ago with 5 other partners, and I was on the original group that saved Radnor Lake, 17 of us. I love that place dearly. I've shown the property plans to 3 client-based people, my age group, empty nesters, and to the person. They are all very, very interested, and primarily interested because of the sensitivity and the way that it's laid out. So, thank you.
Anyone else wishing to speak in favor?
My name is Lisa Mackey, and I am a former resident of Granny White since 2007. I've just recently downsized, so I'd like to speak in favor as well of what Shannon and this group are trying to do, because in trying to look for that type product in Brentwood, I've recently just moved down to the Gulch area into a condo until I can find something like that. So I would like to speak in favor. I think they've done a beautiful job. It's unlike anything else that you can find in Brentwood for that type and size of home. And I just love the preservation and the time and thought they've put into putting this plan together. So I'd like to speak in favor and like to see you to approve it.
Thank you. Anyone else in the audience wishing to speak in favor? Okay, seeing none, the 4 representatives, we'll start with the High Valley.
Mr. Chairman, before I start, I'd like to recognize everybody that's in opposition to this development. Please raise their hand. Mr. Chairman, my name is Bill Frash. I'm the president of High Valley Homeowners Association. My property currently joins this land. My wife and I have lived all over Nashville because I am a home builder, a responsible home builder, and I'm a responsible developer. So I understand the issues that they're trying to place forth. We've had three homes in this area, so we understand what's there. We want the commission to understand what the makeup is of that area of town, and you saw it on the map, and it's in the brochure that we gave you all, the packet we gave you. If you look at the layout of the land and what's around it, it is all large lots, with lots of trees and large houses. And we're not ashamed of that. We moved to that area because that's what it is. The common characteristic is the loss of green space. Presently, it falls underneath the Green Hills overlay. There is nothing remotely similar to Green Hills in this area. So there's no cluster designs out there. There's no cluster housing. You'll find nothing like this development proposed within 4 or 5 miles. It should be noted that the neighbors that surround this are not opposed to this land being developed. We're not. We're opposed to the density that they're trying to place in there. It is not fair for someone that's relocated to this area to have to look out the back of their house and know that there are 5 houses facing their property. And this is what's going to happen to people who live upon Oman Drive. I don't care what kind of buffer they put in there. Buffering, as we know, goes in. It takes 20 years to have any kind of real effect. I'm not going to talk about geotechnical because we're going to bring an engineer to talk about that. But if you go to the geotechnical section in the packet we gave you, you will find a couple of pull-out maps in there. And one of them's pretty impressive. It's got a lot of orange on it. That orange reflects landslides. And if you look at it, you'll find that over 50% of this property is in a landslide situation. It can't be developed in the first place. They showed you an alternate plan that they are capable of putting in. And yes, we recognize they can under RS40 do that. But if you also know anything about developing and building, they can't put that in. The topography of the land is not going to allow them to put in 56 lots underneath the RS40 zoning because of the landslide situation. We feel like if you deny the zoning and force them into the RS40 zoning, that the density will take care of itself. We recognize that there's going to be traffic increases no matter what takes place. It's going to affect the country club. If you've driven down Granny White Pike, you know that there are no shoulders, and we're experiencing a lot of wrecks in that area. The biggest thing that we're presently worried about, and it's the decreased value of the properties. And we backed it up by 2 letters that you have in your folder there. One from the leading real estate agent in sales in that area of town who says that this is not going to work in the price point they're trying to develop, and they're not going to be able to sell the pieces of property for what they think they can. And it's going to have a negative impact of anywhere from 10 to 15% on our property values. It's a major hit for people who decided to move out into that area. And again, you've got the 2 letters from respectable real estate agents saying that. It is our belief overall that this is a non-conforming development. It doesn't conform to anything that's in the area. Several years ago, all the neighbors in that area got together and worked with the councilman that we represented us at the time, and the zoning was R40. And over a period of about 6 months, it took us to go before the council to have this zoning changed to RS40. It's a lot of work. We did it because we thought it would protect us from this kind of development coming in. The person sitting beside me, who was recognized by the council for being at the meeting, was Eddie Arnold. I know what he wanted for the piece of property because he told me. Any sensible developer that goes in there, even underneath the RS40, is going to protect the trees. He is going to protect the property. He's going to be respectful of the neighbors. We think the non-conforming and non-conformality of existing situation is going to take place is going to be ruled in our favor, we hope. And we respectfully ask that you deny the zoning change and keep the RS40 in place. Thank you.
Thank you. Representative from Hounds Run.
Thank you. I'm Jim Murphy with Bradley Arant Bolt Cummings on behalf of Hounds Run. And since everybody else has said it, I used to live in this neighborhood too for many years. I lived on Granny White right north of Spider Creek. For many years, my brother lived just south of this property. So I'm very familiar with the neighborhood as well. Hounds Run, just for your information, is located to the north of the Arnold property on the west side of Granny White. Bedding Park Drive is the entrance into Hounds Run, and it's the first cut through between Granny White, and Otter Creek. So one of the major concerns that the folks in Hounds Run have is obviously traffic. As Mr. Fresh mentioned, even though you could lay out a plan that shows 56 lots under the RS 40, the neighbors don't believe you can economically develop 56 lots. They think the real number that you can develop is between 35 and 40. That's the economic number that could be developed. As Mr. Fresh mentioned, the neighbors are not opposed to the development. This is not, oh, we want to keep this area as a park. They recognize this property is going to be developed. The concern is the density. And so those are the issues that the neighbors that I represent have asked me to raise. They don't want the density of 57 lots in this neighborhood. The fewer lots, the less traffic. Obviously, the less traffic, the less cut-through problems that the neighbors will have. We also don't believe that this project is consistent with the requirements of Special Policy Area 13. One of those requirements that was shown on the screen by the staff was that for non-conventional developments, any new development should be designed to reflect the character and appearance of the abutting conventional subdivisions in terms of lot widths and front setbacks. Here, there is no question. None of the smaller lots that are shown, particularly the ones on the south side of the access drive between the access drive and Oman Drive, they're 17 very small lots, some of them as small as 0.13 acres that are backed up against lots that are greater than an acre size. So we contend that this plan doesn't meet the requirements of Special Policy Area 13 because of the small lots. Matt Foster will raise that same issue for the city of Forest Hills. That's their concern. As the councilman said, obviously there's an issue about the small lots, and we think that issue should be resolved before this commission approves the plan. This commission ought to tell the developer to go back and bring back a plan that eliminates the problems with those smaller lots. The other issue that we have is the number of flag lots in this subdivision. Under your subdivision regulations, you can't use this many flag lots in the subdivision. There's over 11, I think there's 11 flag lots in this development. That's inconsistent with your subdivision regulations, but you're permitting that as part of this SP to allow this developer to maximize the density on this project. And we contend that the maximization of the density is the problem here. It's not a no development option. It's the maximization of the density. The other concern that we have is that the plan calls for example, the staff noted the buffer between the south side of the property along Oman Drive. But if you look at the plan that is presented by the developer, that plan shows detention ponds and drainage ditches running through the buffer. We contend that it's going to be difficult to provide buffering for visual buffering with those detention ponds located in that area. If that is possible, we would contend that the developer should do the design for the detention ponds and the landscaping now. Have that presented to the neighbors before the SP plan is presented so that we will know that that will work. The other concern we have along those same lines is along Granny White Pike. The conditions call for a turn lane. The turn lane would impede or take away some of the area that is shown as a detention pond or two detention ponds along the front side of the property. Again, it might be possible to design that, but if it is, it should be designed in advance. So in light of all of those issues, the neighbors would contend that this SP plan is not ready for approval. It should be either denied or deferred and require the developer to show to the neighbors that they can deal with these issues on the front end, not as a condition of approval when they can come back in and say, hey, we've got 56 units, you've got to find a way to let us have our 56 units, and that will have an impact. Thank you.
Oman Drive representative.
Hi, my name is Eric Snyder. I'm representing the Oman Drive Homeowners Association. I have been a geotech engineer for 20 years in Nashville and am currently a geotechnical specialty contractor. I actually fixed the landslides that this development will make happen. I'm just here to let you know that the geology and the topography of this lot, this piece of property, it's in the Fort Payne geologic formation. It is the producer of the colluvial soils. The colluvial soils roll down those steep hills and land in the shallower areas, not just the steep areas. So these developments on this property, it's not just the steep areas that are at risk. These colluvial soils by nature just are deposited by gravity and water forces. So they are just barely at their stability limit. So any disturbance to any of these areas does cause risk, and a lot of these areas are in high risk. We're all familiar with the flood of 2010. It was brought on by excessive precipitation. We had failures at the top of Oman Drive in the High Valley Drive area. You'll probably hear from one of those homeowners. There was failures over on Saxon Drive on the other side. That's not the only flood and precipitation event that happened. Everybody is looking at this as a one-time event, a lifetime event, and it may be near that. But in 1975, we had a precipitation event that involved a lot of flooding and had enough landslides that the Department of Geology, the Tennessee Department of Geology, actually did a study on the landslides. And landslides were in this area on the other side of Granny White and all over this extensive area and this type of topography and geology. Their conclusions were oversteepening of sites and colluvial soils. This development will oversteepen the slopes and cause disturbance in the colluvial areas. There's also been a lot of landslides in non-historic precipitation events. So in the last 30 years, we've had landslides in Richland Country Club. We've had landslides in Otterwood. We've had landslides in Taggartwood. We've had landslides in Hounds Run. I myself make my living on fixing those properties. So if this development goes in, I'm probably going to get a lot of business. So I don't really have a dog in the fight in trying to dissuade against this zoning variation. If you look at the Phase 2 portion of this, there are a lot of critical lots in Phase 2, and there are non-critical lots in Phase 2. All of the lots in Phase 2 are in a Del Rose material, which is colluvial soil. So even the non-critical lots are at risk. I would deem them all high-risk lots. Phase 3, most of them are in a Del Rose and colluvial situation, but not all of them. But they are at risk. Phase 1, it's down in the lower portion. You've clustered them down there. They are at a lower risk. But as you cluster homes, you cluster disturbance. And the one main theme in the 2010 flood and the 1975 flood that the Geologic Society, the study said, is that the more disturbance you have, the more chance, the more risk of landslides. So when you stick all those homes down in the bottom, you are going to disturb those colluvial soils, and you're going to disturb them greatly. So if you can spread this development out into larger lots and have the houses farther apart, you're going to reduce the disturbance in a localized area, and you should reduce the landslide area. Excuse me. Other concern is there are designated critical lots there. Critical lots are great. They're on steep slopes, but they are not the only risk. A lot of critical lots, you have to do a geotechnical study on it. The geotechnical studies are limited by access to the slopes, and they're usually on that piece of property. Whatever you do on one piece of property is going to affect above and below. And usually those geotechnical studies do not include up and above. So in closing, all of these sites are at risk. And the more dense you get these home sites and homes, the higher risk it is.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Representative of the City of Forest Hills.
Thank you, Chairman. My name is Matt Foster. I'm an attorney with the law firm of Harwell, Howard, Hine, Gabbert, and Manor. I'm also the city attorney for the city of Forest Hills. First of all, I want to thank you for your time and patience. I know this is a tough job and a tough afternoon. I do also want to recognize that Mayor Bill Koch, the mayor of Forest Hills, is in the audience, as are a number of Forest Hills residents. The residents of Forest Hills are affected by all developments on its borders, especially when there's a loss of natural resources, increased traffic, increased stormwater discharges, increased lighting. I'd like to respectfully request that this commission take notice of the fact that the city of Forest Hills does adjoin this property and that the city of Forest Hills has an Estates C zoning. The base lot area for that zoning district is 1.5 acres, so the minimum lot size is 1.5 acres. I also do want to thank you and ask that you take notice that the city of Forest Hills and this planning commission and the planning department have a long history of good faith cooperation and working together in terms of comprehensive planning, in terms of planning complementary uses and densities. That's true and evident in looking at our planning of bikeways, greenways, and preserving scenic arterials, including Granny White Pike. The City of Forest Hills' objection and concern about the Voce development focuses on phase one of the development. This is on the southern boundary of the development. The cluster lot option, as you know, allows the equivalent of the RS20 zoning district. Cluster lot option is excellent, and it's appropriate here. It reduces grading, it maintains landscaping, reduces stormwater discharge. Forest Hills, in fact, has recently adopted an ordinance that does the exact same thing. However, in Forest Hills, we did put a base on it and said that no lot can be smaller than 1 acre. And so, in the opinion of Forest Hills, this cluster lot option, this rezoning, if permitted, allows the equivalent of RS5 zoning district, and that is incompatible with the city of Forest Hills. In a word, I would call phase one of this development imbalanced. There are 17 small lots. 8 of those 17 are sited on less than 10,000 square feet. Phase one, these 17 lots are an intense use of land. They concentrate noise, traffic, and light where it will most affect the neighbors and most affect the residents of Forest Hills. It concentrates impervious surfaces and dwellings right at the front of the development. There is a lot of open space, but it's all concentrated and pushed to the very back of the subdivision. The open space that does remain in phase one is dominated by driveways and impervious surfaces, which will increase runoff and grading. There is a substantial amount of buffering, landscape buffering, and it's laudable, both on the front of Granny White Pike and on Oman Drive. But that buffering itself is, in the opinion of Forest Hills, insufficient to make it compatible with the city of Forest Hills. Consequently, the City of Forest Hills requests that you either defer or deny this rezoning request. We would also recommend that the developer seriously consider increasing the minimum lot area in phase one to at least 15,000 square feet. This would serve the needs of the developer to site houses on the most appropriate land for construction. It would protect open space, it would limit the intensity of phase one, and it would mitigate the impact on Forest Hills and neighboring communities. We also request that the developer consider subjecting those lots to the RS20 development standards to the extent that the SP plan does not otherwise specifically dictate. In closing, I do want to remind you, I have submitted a letter that covers all of the issues in the SP plan. Most of those, we raise our hand and say, me too, to the conditions recommended by the planning department. One item I do want to focus on is the southbound turn lane. It's come to my attention that we have not received an updated traffic impact study. And so the City of Forest Hills would respectfully suggest that until that comes in, the Planning Commission not decide whether or not to require a southbound turn lane. In our opinion, Voce is about balance, and I think there's a lot of balance there. You see a lot of open space. 37% of the area is preserved as open space, but phase one is incredibly out of balance. We recommend that the Planning Commission require that area to be balanced to increase the minimum lot size. Thank you very much.
Any others in the audience wishing to speak in opposition to give us any items? Yeah, please come forward. Please don't repeat anything that we've heard before, if you would.
My name is Mary Cantani. I live in Richland Woods and represent my neighborhood. We have had, our primary issue with this development is the density and the traffic that is going to be created because it is going to feed through our neighborhood. When Richland Woods was constructed, Metro made them put in a short street called Carly Brook. This street will be opened up to this new development, and most of the residents are going to feed through our subdivision. Our entrance road at this time opens onto Granny White directly across the street from the entrance to Richland Country Club, which is also a secondary entrance for the people who live in Otterwood. We already have tons of traffic being fed from those areas, both commercial and residential, from the country club and from Otterwood, and this would just create that much more traffic. I personally know from the flood of 2010 about the colluvial soil. I do not live on the side of the road that has it, but when we built our house in 2007, the geologist had to come study our property. They made us drill into the bedrock to be sure that our deck was supported properly so that we would not have any issues. But my neighbor who lives on the hill next to me has colluvial soil, which when these floods occurred in 2010, ran down into our property. His water, his mud ran down in our property into our koi pond and created some issues for us. If this development is allowed to happen and these hillsides are disturbed, that is going to be a huge problem for all the residents of that area. Thank you.
Thank you.
Hi, my name is Tom DePaul, and I'm a resident of Radnor Glen. At times you feel that there's like a conspiracy going on relative to property values. We all went through the downcline of the housing market. We followed our house price decline on Zillow 25 to 30% over the first 2 years, like everyone else's did. But then this year, in the last 2 months, we were blessed with hearing of two events that are going to affect our life at Radnor Glen. Number one, the Piedmont pipeline is literally going through our backyard. In addition to that, the announcement of this request for change in the zoning hit the news about the same time. My wife was concerned with what this is doing in addition to our property value. I told her to go out to Zillow. Zillow has a little statistics, if you've never been out there, that says change in value over the last 30 days. Our property showed a decline of $90,000 within the last 30 days after the announcement of the Piedmont gas pipeline going through and the request for this property. I don't need any more help eroding my net worth, and I do believe that the rezoning request will cause a downward spiral of prices further on our properties in Radnor Glen. Thank you.
Thank you.
Good afternoon. Thank you for your time. My name is Roger Price. My home is in High Valley. My property, my lot is lot number 1, and it abuts the eastern edge of this proposed development. My wife and I bought our lot in 1995, and what we learned was that the developer was under no obligation to explain to us what colluvial soil was. Well, it wasn't too long after that we found out. After we hired a contractor and started doing engineering, we ended up spending several $100,000 in change orders as we went along to deal with the colluvial soil that was on the property. And after all of that, we felt like we had over-engineered our property. But yet, on December, or in May of 2010, 200 feet of our driveway and a 75-foot section of a 10-foot retaining wall, a cantilevered retaining wall, failed. We thought we had been told, and we had designed our property in such a way that we wouldn't have these kinds of issues. But $200,000 later, we did. We believe that the current plan that proposes to develop 9 lots on the northern and the eastern edge of this property in an area that is in the area of a 20% grade. No matter what happens and how much they design these things and how much money they spend, at some point those properties are going to fail. And prior to that, during construction, my property and any of the other properties that abut this property are going to have some problems once they start dynamiting and doing excavation work. So I'm here, and you would be doing the same thing if this was your property. I'm here to ask you to do the right thing and send this back to the developer and tell them to get it right the next time. This way it's just not going to work. And I take exception to what the councilman said about none of us.
Okay. Thank you.
Saying we don't want this development. We're not saying we don't want it. We just say do it right.
Next speaker.
Good afternoon. My name is Dominic Mancuso. I live on Radnor Glen, and I'm adjacent to Granny White. I'm on the corner. I can walk with my dog down to this property. That's how close I am. And if you take that little square with the staff recommendation off, you will see my house. Okay? I have 2 concerns. When they show the nice pictures, the nice graphs of where they're putting this, they show this nice green swath at the top of the property, the northern edge of the property. The reason that swath is there, because there are high tension wires there. Nobody's going to buy lots under or next to high tension wires. That is a negative. So to make that look like they're keeping a huge portion of the property green is kind of a canard. My second concern is I've heard a lot of opinions about the environmental sensitivity of this development, but what we haven't seen is an environmental impact study. There is significant wildlife in this area on that property, which happens to be adjacent to Radnor Lake. Okay? If you develop a huge portion of this property, there will be displacement of wildlife. This will create additional pressure on the populations in the remaining wild areas, including Radnor Lake. And that is not a good thing, because we've seen across the country what happens with additional pressure. I would ask that there be an environmental impact study done on this area and Radnor Lake and the impact on both before any decision is made. I'd further urge the Commission to respect the neighbors, respect the land, respect nature and the wildlife there, and respect the law as it stands in the current zoning. Thank you.
My name is Charles Kimball, and thank you for allowing me to speak. My wife and I lived in the area called Hickory Springs for almost 34 years. A particular concern to us in Hickory Springs area is the very large projected increase in water runoff from this development. The numbers we have seen estimate the amount of water after development will almost double. This is a very large increase from a large area. And where will the water go? It currently flows from this property and will in the future across Granny White Pike into or along the south side of Richland Country Club, and all of this water, every bit of it, then as now, will funnel into a very small stream that runs through our Hickory Springs neighborhood. During normal rainfalls, this small stream goes up and down. There's no great concern. With large amounts of rain, it overflows its banks. On several occasions, it's flooded our homes. And this was not just in the May 2010 event. All of us in this area greatly worry about a large increase in water, which is what the flow from this property after development will be. Unless adequately controlled, it will flood our area Forest Hills, causing major damage to property and possibly injury to people. But I understand the developer has not yet furnished detailed plans how to handle this large runoff. At public meetings, they said they're going to have retention ponds. Retention ponds may be an answer, and several are shown on the plans, but retention ponds to offer any degree of assurance will need to be carefully engineered. Further, most of the retention ponds are on the hillsides in an area with unstable soil. Can the ponds on the upper levels be engineered well enough that they're not going to collapse. This would be a disaster for the area and for us. These and other factors would seem critical for this development. So when I understand no detailed plans have been put forth to handle this additional water runoff. Thank you.
Thank you.
Hi, my name is Whitney Sitzler, and I own Lot 2 at Richland Woods, and that is the lot that is adjacent to the Arnold property on the south side. And my lot is 3/4 of an acre, but it backs up to where it looks like there are going to be 4 houses in my backyard and detached garages or something. I mean, it's all like clustered right in my backyard. And I don't live there right now. I bought that lot in 2006 for $375,000. And then right after that, I got divorced. And so I sold my house in McGavock Farms and lost money on that, paid off the bank on my Richland Woods lot, and bought a cluster home in Green Hills, which is where I live. And I love my cluster home. But the people that are going to buy my lot are not looking for a cluster home. They could go to Green Hills and get one if that's what they wanted. And I just cannot take another real estate hit. I just feel like the market has been so depressed in that area. I don't know if any of y'all are familiar with Richland Woods, but we had a builder in there who went under and I guess declared bankruptcy, and he had 3 houses sitting on the market, and we are just now starting to get our values back, not even close to where they were, but hopefully climbing up. I had a guy about 3 months ago offer me $300,000 for my lot, but now he doesn't want it anymore because he's waiting to see if there are going to be cluster homes in my backyard. And my other issue is the road going through Richland Woods. It's just very small and it curves, and if people are using that as a shortcut, which they will, somebody's going to get mowed down. It's just dangerous the way it curves through there. I just think that they really need to do 1 lot per acre. We are not opposed to the development. We don't use it as a park. It's all fenced, it's wooded, but thank you.
Thank you.
How are you? I'm Barry Holt. First confession is I live in a McMansion on the corner of Granny White and Beddington Park. I've been there 24 years, raised 4 children there, have 4 dogs, and moved out there because of the lot size and the character of the neighborhood. I am not opposed to development at all. My concern is with the density and its effect on not only the traffic but the water that's been mentioned. And the concern I have is that the planning be done in advance. And it's from my own experience. Radnor Glen, which is immediately across Granny White from my home, was designed and approved and resulted, even with the approval of the plans, with a massive amount of water runoff under Granny White and into my yard that's eroded the yard, and downstream water has done a lot of damage in the neighborhood and subsequent neighborhoods as the water moves. So I would just like to voice a concern for the planning on the front end, the location of the detention ponds, the addressing of the water, the addressing of the traffic, the turn lane, et cetera, on the front, not in retrospect, because my experience, and excuse my skepticism, was it didn't work as planned in my prior experience. Thank you.
Anyone else wishing to speak in opposition? Okay, the applicant will have 1 minute and 50 seconds for rebuttal.
Mr. Chairman, my name is Kevin Gangwer, Civil Site Design Group, representing the client on this. I want to rebut a couple of the comments. One, the neighbors believe that we can't develop the 56 lots. I think they're anticipating that we can't, but I've been in this business for nearly 30 years, and we can design that, and we can make a 56-lot development work on that property. Second idea was that there are no cluster lots, no cluster developments anywhere near this neighborhood. Actually, Richland Woods, which is our abutting neighbor, is a cluster lot development itself. Talked about the landslides. We have our own geotechnical engineer. He has reviewed the information. He has done studies on this property, and he assures us that we can develop this safely and effectively. We also will have geotechnical studies for every lot that is even marginally suspect in this development. So there will be a geotechnical study and a requirement for the structural engineering for each of these homes that are on any slopes that have colluvium or are steep lots. Last, the stormwater, we will be providing stormwater detention on this. We actually will reduce the peak runoff rate that leaves this property from what it is today. So this development will actually improve the peak runoff rates of stormwater runoff. Lastly, traffic analysis we have submitted to the traffic engineer for the city, and they agree there is no effect on the traffic on Granny White Pike. We are adding traffic, but the intersections still operate at a level of service A.
You left me 8 seconds. I don't know that I can make a point, but these are my neighbors too. Whatever we do, we'll do it in a professional manner. We do appreciate your time and consideration. Thank you, Councilman.
I want to thank both the applicant and the opposition for their input. No one repeated what had been said before, and that's refreshing for the commission. So I want to thank you for your input. Is there a motion to close the public hearing?
Move to close the public hearing.
Second. Motion second, close the public hearing. All in favor? Aye. Any opposed? Motion carries. Jeff.
I'm pleased with the overall plan. I'm troubled by the 2 lots that dump directly onto Granny White by themselves. Can you pull that up, Brenda? Correct. Can someone from the applicant explain to me why we need those 2 lots as opposed to everything else exiting through Carly Brook and through the main street?
Which 2 are you looking at? Sure. The 2 lots right here. Oops, I'm sorry. 2 lots right here.
Yeah. That seems to me to be a significant traffic hazard with just those 2 lots.
Yeah, those 2 lots, again, the whole layout was designed to preserve as much of the existing terrain as possible, including the drainage ways. There's a drainage way that is on the backside of the lots on the drive to the left, exactly, and it has trees in it, woods, and so, again, a conventional layout might have looked differently, might have had those internally accessed, but again, is in an effort to preserve those drains and trees. That's why those lots front.
Thank you.
Granny White.
That's all I have.
Great.
Well, I guess this is burning by fire, my first really controversial planning decision. I do think that the development overall is done quite well. I do agree with Jeff on the 2 lots that go out into Granny White Pike as well. So if those could be done internally, maybe do a bridge over the stream, I think that might really help. But this is the deal, and I'm going to be pretty blunt, is that I know that the neighbors know that by right, by law, the developer can come in and develop a lot of this. And if they were to do that under the current RS 40, it would take a lot more grading. Me personally, if I live in the area, I live in Creve Hall. Some say that's on the other side of the tracks of Forest Hills, but we like it there. But I'm very close to here. My daughter goes to daycare on Granny White Pike, the Montessori Center. So I'm probably one of the additional cars on your road. And I know it gets, traffic is bad, there, and Battery Lane backs up as well. It's just a bad area because there's not a lot of road capacity. But by right, I think that the development would be currently developing it just straight up RS40 is a terrible option. It's a terrible, terrible idea. It's not only bad for the community, it's bad for Nashville. The things that I do like about the development are the sidewalks, really like the internal pathways, the preservation of old growth woods and trees is very impressive. I think that that's something that you should be proud of. Not many developers do that well. It's got a lot of green space. I like the idea that there's just not a lot of McMansions on the property. There's smaller houses that reduce energy costs, et cetera, for the environment. To me, quite frankly, it seems like a logical rezoning. It seems like what we call, to paraphrase, good smart growth options. I know the neighbors don't want to hear that, but me looking in from the outside with if to make sure, but I think there's some concerns that I need to make sure that the staff and the departments make sure is that it does reduce peak runoff rates, that the turn lane is done only if needed by the traffic study. But overall, with those things worked out, I think that it seems like a logical rezone, and that's where I'm at right now. I'm interested to hear what the other commissioners, but again, I would like to, for sure, if there's one thing that needs to be changed, I agree with the commissioner who spoke before me, is that the two lots should not have a separate entrance way to Granny White Pike. That will create a lot of problems and slow traffic and that sort of thing. Thank you, Commissioner.
Andre?
I wanted to ask the staff to help us remember and the public understand what happens with an SP in the next stages. If an SP is what gets to be, if it goes through the process of an SP, what are the levels of approval that happen beyond, for example, tonight?
What will happen if this is recommended for approval? It will go to the council for approval. And if the council approves it, then you have a preliminary plan approval. You still have to have final site plan approval for this, and the final site plan is where a lot of the engineering work takes place. And it is possible that through that engineering work, this will change somewhat. If it changes significantly, it would have to come back to you. If it is a lot is lost or a little bit of rearranging, it may be able to continue as an administrative approval. And then finally, they will have to plat it. There'll have to be a final plat for this. And so which is why they've talked now about the subdivision regulations and ensuring they have the variances now for the subdivision regulations rather than proceeding all the way to final plat and then you telling them no, that they can't have it, which would, again, change the whole development. So this is only the beginning.
I think that's an important point because I think part of what an SP is about is to have controls over what actually happens. And if there's engineering that creates issues that don't make any sense, then we rely on our other departments to help us even understand, the council understand that. And I think that for us to be able to say, if we were to recommend this, to put in a recommendation that certain criteria have to be met, I think there are a lot of great concerns about the geotechnical studies and the stormwater runoff that we would want to be assured in those later stages were really going to be effective or not. And if they're not, then to rearrange it or reduce the numbers or the locations of the development. So I think that's part of this process that is to me, of some comfort to feel like, well, if we can appreciate the creativity of it and I don't want to repeat everything you just said, but a lot of the aspects of this that are exciting for Nashville, I want the Barry Holtz and the other people to feel like this one is actually going to work. And so if they say the detention is going to work, let's see that it does in our recommendation if we were to push it forward, to remember that with an SP, we get to control whether that happens or not. So I think a lot of the points are really valid. One of the things I meant to say first is I appreciate the civility of all of this. It's a very tense and emotional issue, and I think everybody made excellent presentations. And for us, it's really fantastic. So thank you for all of your time and work and the money that you spent on the presentation on the opposition and also on the people who are for it. One thought that came to mind is could there be any more places where pervious surfaces could be added? I know there's some already planned, but there are new products for driveways and roads that maybe that could be considered, that more pervious surface could be put in so that, again, we're addressing these issues at the outset. The light pollution has already been addressed, but I think that's one that's obvious when you're next to an observatory, especially that dark sky lighting be honored. And I think that the environmental trends today recognize that people are interested in less energy consumption in their homes, and sometimes that creates a smaller footprint for a home and a smaller site. And I think that there are plenty of proven places for the people who are concerned about their market value. When you look at somebody like Henry Turley in Memphis, who developed downtown and did Mud Island, he put little houses next to great big houses that had a 1-to-6 price ratio, and they were hugely successful. So I think that this is a potentially dramatic change in how we look at development in Nashville that could be really positive. But I think the responsibility of the other parts of the environment, like the runoff and the mudslides, need to be really carefully reviewed. That's my first thought.
Thank you. Bill?
I'll try to be brief. I just have one question, and I don't know if somebody's here that can answer it or not. We heard a lot of discussion about soils sliding. If anybody can provide me, since 1975, how many slides have taken place on this parcel that we're looking at? Okay.
I live adjacent to Phase 3 in High Valley, and there is a slide. I lost 3 trees during the flood that fell into my backyard, just barely missing my house. One tree weighed 14,000 pounds. So if you go out, you will see a sinkhole in that property that is behind Phase 3 and behind my house.
Okay, so one slide then.
No, sir. My house at the corner of Oman Drive and High Valley Drive experienced nearly $300,000 worth of damage to slides. The fourth house on the right, entering Radnor Glen, the entire house slid 1 foot down the hill.
But are these on this parcel?
They adjoin that parcel.
But are they on this parcel?
No, they're touching.
Okay.
No studies have been done on that property.
Okay. All right, thank you. I appreciate the position of all the neighbors, and as been stated, everybody made a great effort to not repeat what somebody else has said, and so I really appreciate that, and I think the other commissioners do too. But when I read through the staff report and look at all the information that we've been provided with, and know that this development meets all of it's consistent with all the land use policies that are in place here, meets all the requirements, And knowing that this is the first stage of an extended process that will have to have approvals of various metro departments as it moves along, and knowing that your council member and his promise to say that he will, to use his term, shepherd this process along to make sure that it is the best that it can be before it's finished, I have no trouble in supporting approval of this. Thank you.
Phil?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And again, I want to add my congratulations for the obvious preparation by both sides in this particular issue. As I looked at the pictures that were presented, I had one phrase that kind of came forward in my mind, and that was environmentally fresh. And I think that that's the best way to describe what I saw. And if you look at the keeping of the trees and the house elements and everything, houses elements, it all seemed to come together in such a nice package. And if you compare that mentally with the original plan, what the developer can do right now with what the program that they've planned, to me, it is much superior. So I, too, would support the findings of the staff.
There was a lot of talk about storm water runoff, and I'm looking at our staff report. What is stormwater saying about that? I know that no development can be done that causes water to flow onto another property.
And Steve Mishu is about to come and talk to you.
And I'm waiting to hear from him.
Hello, Commissioner. Steve Mishu, Metro Stormwater. It's been a long time since I spoke to most of you. A couple new faces. Hello. Well, our regulations doesn't say that water from upstream can't flow downstream. That's just nature. It has to go downstream. But what we'll do is we'll make sure that this development doesn't negatively impact downstream neighbors as far as flow. Somebody over here mentioned, the runoff will double. I think there was papers that were submitted to you by Neil Schaefer. The only problem with what they're suggesting is the numbers they provided assumes no detention, which is just not going to happen. Our requirements require detention. So we'll require detention. We'll make sure that the flow is reduced.
Thank you.
Thank
you, Steve. You find it. You spend a lot of hours here. That's the first time you've been able to speak in a while. So,
well, I'm just happy to be able to speak for you guys.
Sure. Wait a minute. Another question.
Sir.
Just while you're up here, so generally the regulations, just so you got to dumb it down for me sometimes. I'm just a good old country boy with a diesel pickup truck. Y'all know that. Diesel pickup. It's more efficient, right? But anyway, the question that I have is that the regulations, will it, say for instance, the development does cause more runoff, do the regulations require that same amount of increased runoff to be retained?
Our regulations will dictate that there is no increase through the 100-year storm event.
Okay, thank you.
So they'll analyze it in this grassy, wooded state. Then they'll analyze it as a developed state, and then they'll reanalyze it with all the flow routed through ponds. And the ponds, with enough volume, it's kind of like a bathtub. You've got a big bathtub, you've got a small little drain. It just lets the water out so slowly. So we'll just require that they have enough volumes in the ponds and enough structures to reduce the flow coming off the site. We'll make sure of it.
I have a question.
Yes.
I have a question. One of the comments or points of discussion was that it seemed that all the detention was as it might be, at the lowest part of the site, but that was near the front where there's supposed to be buffer and where there may end up being a turning lane. And if that turning lane impacted it, or if the buffer needed to be widened, is there any way to, maybe isn't the right word, but sort of to cascade the retention so that there's some detained at higher places before, so that it's not all concentrated in one area? Are there physical, not necessarily ponds, but other ways to hold water, to let it out slowly?
There is. Actually, what you can't see that clearly on this development is that the 2 ponds at the very bottom of the development aren't the only ponds. There's additional ponds, 1, 2, yeah. There's one right here. I think there's another one right here. There's another one right here. So I don't remember if that one was not or not, but there is multiple ponds that will hold the water back.
So if the turning lane were to encroach the width of the detention ponds down by the road, what would Metro Water recommend for detainage down there?
Well, I mean, ponds really have to go at the lowest spot, but we've worked with engineers on the development side. We've worked with Public Works. We work hand in hand to make sure that our regulations and their regulations will just work things out. And you also mentioned pervious pavement. It gets a little bit tricky in the right-of-way. There's, the fire department, Public Works, with heavy, equipment, stuff like that, like fire trucks. It may not be the best option to put pervious pavement in the right-of-ways. I think the developer at one time has suggested making some pea gravel roads for the common roads and stuff like that. We wouldn't dictate something like that, but if you don't put it in the right of way and you put it more on private property, then you just increase the maintenance burden for each individual property. So it's kind of a fine line of whether you really want to implement pervious pavement in this type of development.
Well, yeah, I was thinking of solid pervious pavement that wasn't gravel, that was more like here, that is contained for the driveway areas or around the garages or places that otherwise would be just instant runoff.
As long as we're not, as long as it's not in the right of way where not dump trucks, but garbage trucks are going through there, you don't want to risk breaking it up.
Stuart?
I'm not.
Oh, Judy, I'm sorry.
It's getting wound up.
Thank you. One other question that I had, there was a lot of talk about environmental impact study. Is it our normal practice to require an environmental impact study?
No.
I'm reading a note. I just wanted that in here. I'm reading a note that says that the applicant could develop the property as a more conventional subdivision, but in order to protect the environmental resources and character of the property and reduce grading, a more innovative and sensitive design is proposed. And from what I saw, it is a more sensitive design. I really like this. Every now and then we get a chance to weigh in on something special, and I think that this is something that is special and unique over against the regular cookie cutter subdivisions that we normally see coming in, and that could be, from what I understand, developed here. I like the 37% open space, and I understand that there are some electrical lines that run through that, but I think that overall the plan really exemplifies what Greater Nashville is asking for in our community. Let me just ask you one more question about the turn lane. That's not part of the condition now?
It is, but very conveniently, we have Devin Doyle, who can talk to you more about, other than if you're asking me, is that a condition now? It is.
Okay, I'd like to just hear a little bit about the turn lane. Yeah.
It's been a while since I've been here as well.
I'm working you all tonight, working you.
The Department of Public Works. A traffic impact study was submitted and was evaluated. The initial recommendation in the study was that no turn lane would be required. The engineer who completed the study used an evaluation process that we generally don't use to make that determination, so we asked for some further analysis. In addition, I think there was a reduction in the number of lots from the original submittal to the current proposal. So We have gone ahead and conditioned the left turn lane with the understanding that I believe the study was actually, we received it just this afternoon, but we haven't had time to review it and analyze it. So we have requested that the condition of the left turn lane be included with the caveat that upon further evaluation and discussion, that we could potentially modify that condition.
That while you're here, there's some concern about the two-lot, the houses. If you look at the plan there, so we have two drives coming out onto Granny White Pike. How far apart are those?
Do you mean the proposed?
Yes.
The driveway for the two lots versus
Yes.
I think it's just a single driveway that serves those two lots, and I don't know exactly what the separation is from that driveway and their main access road. Is that what you're asking? I could defer to the site engineer. I can't remember what it's a fairly lengthy property frontage.
It wasn't any
300 feet.
Did you all have any concern about it?
No, we
Okay.
did not. Yeah, the two homes would generate less than 20 trips, which is 10 entering, 10 exiting trips over the course of a day.
So there's no site issues there?
There's a current, basically, there's a driveway cut there, roughly at that location. They're going to move it a little further to separate it out, but there's a current driveway cut at that location.
Okay. Thank you so much.
Also, just to clarify, because Brenda's correct, we do not require an environmental report, especially as referred here, that dealt with animals and stuff like that. However, I would say 95% of the evaluation of this project's been on environmental factors, working with all of the departments, especially slopes and soil. They worked with stormwater to make sure that they were using environmentally sensitive stormwater stuff. They've been working with Public Works in terms of their road cuts. All were related to the environmental preservation, so I didn't want people to think that we weren't looking at environmental factors.
Wonderful. Well, looking at the overall plan, it certainly has my support for approval with the conditions.
Stuart?
I understand the skepticism of someone like Mr. Holt. I mean, he's a lawyer, he's cynical. And he probably has seen these things before where things were promised and didn't work out the way they seemed. And we've all seen a lot of development proposed, and none of it ever seems to really have, as first proposed, any real impact on anything else. So I'm shocked that he would be so cynical about wanting to have more things tied down. But it is true that in an SP it's a little bit different. It is a little more fluid, which doesn't mean oversight stops. It means it sort of is more in an SP because it's less fixed. At the same time, I was hoping for more certainty on some things. I am now convinced of why the discussion about the turn lane, that it is in and will not come out unless the Public Works is completely convinced that it needs to come out. I know that the water is always an issue. I think, though, that I'm right in saying that large developments like this, as opposed to a lot of splintered ownership and a small subdivision here and there, I think our history shows a better chance of it actually working with a well-funded, larger development than the sort of separate developments over time. So it's my impression that over the last few years we've seen these large developments actually help the water situation, as counterintuitive as that may seem. I'd like to ask staff if I'm crazy on that. I mean, or I guess staff out here. What? I just think probably it's counterintuitive to people to think the development might actually lessen problems, and we've all seen situations where it just didn't, no matter what people promised. So I don't blame people at all for being skeptical. I'm pretty blown away, however, by the presentation, by how specific, how detailed and specific it has been. I guess I think it is a very legitimate point that Forest Hills brought up, that they are a separate governmental entity and are right there and have wanted to be heard, and I guess have been heard. I don't know how far that goes. I don't know that we give veto power to another municipality. I know we don't do that. But I would, if this is approved by this commission and goes forward, I don't think that, it's my impression from the councilman that he intends for these discussions to just be beginning with Forest Hills. And I think maybe if we go forward with this, there will be more concrete decisions made so that people will know exactly what they're getting. I have to say that I do agree in general with the other comments. We have, I don't see anything cookie cutter, by the way, about what's out there now. I think people have a choice on where they want to be, and they should have lots of choices in Davidson County. There's nothing right or wrong with this proposal over some of the existing homes. There's nothing right or wrong with my being on a street in Hillsborough Village that has all sorts of different sizes in one area. And you're exactly right, Andre. We've seen in other places huge benefits from having choices in one neighborhood. So I'm not as worried about that as maybe some people are. I think a quality development like this will ultimately be at the best interest of the existing neighborhoods and not just the people who move in there. So I suppose that on balance, even though I probably wouldn't be so supportive if I didn't think this council member and this staff would be riding herd over this and wanting as much tied down by the time it gets to the council and for a final vote. I might not be as supportive if it were not this staff and this council member, but I feel like we'll be well served by going forward with this proposal with the conditions that they've put on it.
Hunter?
I don't have much to add, and I pretty much agree with all the comments that other commissioners have made, but I think it's important, and hopefully you can tell by the nature of our comments, for the community to understand that we take this very seriously. And our job is to determine whether projects that come before us are good planning or not. And while it may be difficult to understand why building 50 or 60 homes next to your home where you've got what feels like a park now is good planning, I can assure you, given my experience across the country in residential development as an architect and planner, that that this project team has gone to extraordinary measures to create a place and to really put themselves under certain regulations that are frankly better than our own zoning ordinance. You've heard over and over, if this was zoned under the current zoning, this could be really detrimental to the area and could frankly be poor planning. And the other point that was made earlier that I want to confirm from my experience is over the last 10 years, there is, the gentleman mentioned before, there is a significant trend across the country to, in terms of the market for smaller homes, especially among empty nesters and especially among the upscale and high-end market. So with that, I'm going to recommend or make the motion that we approve staff's recommendation.
Second.
Okay, the staff's recommendation is to approve with conditions and disapprove without all conditions and grant variance to the subdivision regulations for flag lots and sidewalks. Is that your motion? Okay, we've got a motion, second. All in favor?
Can I make a quick amendment to that motion?
Yes.
I'd like to amend it to include only one main arterial on to Granny White and to eliminate the second drive and let them work that out. Second.
Can I add a thought to that? I don't know exactly where you're going, but I was looking at this, and there's a possibility that 2 lots that are directly south of Carly Brook Lane, if those were reoriented 90 degrees, and you did a road in from there that serviced those 2 reoriented and the next lot, and that would take care of some of that.
Yeah, I just think we let them work it out, and
But I mean, that's a
therefore,
possible, what I'm pointing out.
therefore they don't have a second arterial on to Granny White.
It's a
It's a driveway, excuse me.
Okay, is that,
There now, right?
It's there now.
It's there now.
well, there's a driveway there now that serves one house, I think.
Yeah. And that's what I'm suggesting. It would continue to serve just one house, and this other would serve 3.
You still want to make your amendment?
I'm okay with Phil's amendment to my amendment.
Wait a minute now.
Okay.
Who made the motion?
Phil's saying leave the driveway.
Hunter?
Phil's motion, as I understand it, or suggestion, was that the driveway off of Granny White can only service one home.
That's correct.
Why is that? Why is that something for us to decide here?
I think this is mainly, I want it just as a suggestion to the developer that they look at that and see if it's practical and answer some of the questions that we've had about a troublesome situation there with those 2 lots.
I'm fine with that. I just, I don't know if
Okay.
I'm for it as a...
If the maker of the motion is okay with it, let's go with the original motion and second, and suggest or ask the developer to try to work that out without the second.
That's fine.
Okay.
So
We're not amending Hunter's motion, we're just making a recommendation.
We're going, the original motion is to approve with conditions, staff's recommendation, approve with conditions, disapprove without all conditions, and grant variance to the subdivision regulations for flag lots and sidewalks, and ask the developer to work with staff to try to eliminate that second entry onto Granite White.
Prior to the council review of the plan.
So I thought I heard that differently, though.
Okay.
Are we asking the developer to try to eliminate the driveway, or are we asking the developer to attempt to reduce the number of lots that are served by that driveway? Or either?
I'm not asking to reduce the lots, just asking to reduce the second entrance. Those 2 lots facing out on, that entrance out onto Granny White. Now, there is a driveway there now that's servicing one of the homes, one house, so I think we just leave it that that's a concern, and when it comes back, we'll be looking at that before we do the final plan.
So it's not a requirement.
It's a suggestion that they work it out so they're not turned down when they come back to us at final. All in favor of the motion, aye? Aye. Any opposed? Motion carries.
I have a question.
We're now ready for item number 4.
Excuse me, in this case, will we see this before final plat, or will it just be a staff review? Will their final plat be a staff review, or could it come before the commission?
It can come back here.
It will if it's different.
Final plan, I mean.
If the final plan matches the original plan you approved, then it wouldn't come back to you. It would be only if there were changes that staff didn't feel comfortable.
Mr. Chairman, this body can require that it come back to us.
Yeah.
And I think we should do that for something of this magnitude.
That's where I was headed, Stuart. I'd like to, is that a motion?
You just direct us to, we'll bring it back,
Okay.
yeah.
We'd like,
To the staff. to bring it
I would
back
like
here
to
for
see
final
it
approval.
before final approval.
We operate as your designee. In this case, you've asked to bring it back. We'll
Okay.
bring it back to you.
Thank you.
Doug,
Remember that.
we're bringing this back to them.
I see a concern on the applicant's face that all we're asking, normally this could go back to the staff for their approval, and we're asking to come back to full council for the final plat approval.
Commission.
It's not a public hearing.
No, public hearing's over with, they've approved.
Are you taking a break, or you?
Well, we only got this one out, and I hate to hold them up. It's,
I don't have a problem. I just
think everybody else wants to get out too. So.
Brenda, you want to go on and start?
Brenda?
This is item 4E on your agenda. This is a request for periodic review of Site 3 of the Nashville Village PUD, and this was requested by Councilmember Johnson. This was the original plan approved in 1979 for the entire PUD. The piece we're looking at is, there it is this section here. This is Site 3. The Nashville Village PUD was approved in 1979, as I said, and has been revised several times. This is the master plan from 2001, and there is a range of uses permitted in the Nashville Village PUD, including a number of different types of housing. There's a daycare, neighborhood commercial, there is a golf course, which actually the community is oriented around, and a tennis center. The land use policy for the entire PUD is residential medium, which allows a mix of housing types at 4 to 9 units per acre. The council member may request the Planning Commission to review a PUD or a portion of the PUD, and if the Planning Commission's role is to determine whether there's activity on the PUD or if the PUD is inactive. If the PUD is found to be inactive, then the Planning Commission makes a recommendation to the council to either maintain the PUD as approved, amend the PUD, or to cancel the PUD and rezone appropriately. There are measures to determine activity. The first is that 6 or more years have elapsed since the council approval. And in this portion of the PUD, it was approved in 1979 and hasn't gone back to the council. Whether or not construction has begun on the site, and that includes infrastructure, or if right-of-way has been acquired or construction of off-site improvements have been made. And you also may take into consideration the aggregate of actions that have been taken, if any, by the owner of the PUD to develop the PUD or get it ready for development in the past 12 months. So you need to find if the PUD is active or inactive, and when you make your recommendation, if you make a recommendation of inactivity, it has to be based on whether or not the existing PUD is consistent with the goals, policy, and objectives of the general plan or any other plan that is involved with this property. And then when you make your recommendation, as I said, you either maintain it as approved, amend the PUD, or cancel the PUD and rezone if needed. There is a time period for that you have to act within, and it's 90 days after the initiation of the request. And in this case, it was March 1st, and within that time, you have to hold a public hearing, and if needed, make a recommendation to the council. And for Site 3, that time expires on May 30th. If you don't take any action in that time, then it's assumed that you recommend that it be reapproved by council without alteration, but it would have to go back to the council.
And it would require an ordinance.
That's right. It would require an ordinance, sorry. Okay, here is Site 3 in the context of the larger PUD. It's located at 901B Nashboro Boulevard and is approved for 73 townhouse units. This actually has final site plan approval, and this is the final site plan that was approved. A letter was sent to the property owner asking for documentation of activity, and a site visit was made in March 2012. And at that site visit, the presence of infrastructure was observed, and there were several things. There's water, sewer. There are some utilities that have been in this site. And so when you're making your determination of activity, the first one, again, is the 6 or more years have elapsed, and it was approved in 79, and no changes, no council action, so it doesn't meet that activity. There is, however, public water and sanitary sewer that's been installed, so it does meet the measure for has construction begun. There was no documentation provided by the property owner of any right-of-way that was acquired or construction of off-site improvements that were needed for this particular portion of the PUD. Again, you may also take in the aggregate of activities, and the property owner did provide a number of activities that they've taken, including they've done the engineering work for as-built surveys, and they've identified the items needed to complete. the work and obtained the building permits. They have done site plans, architecture plans, landscaping plans. They have applied for a master building permit, and it was applied for in December, and that review was in progress and was frozen with the request for a PUD review. Prior to it being frozen, a number of agencies had signed off on their portions of the permit. And they've applied to NES for service, and they have submitted construction plans for final site plan approval. And in looking at that, the documentation provided plus the site visit, staff is recommending that this portion of the PUD, Site 3, be found to be active.
Council Lady Johnson will consider you as an applicant on this, so you can speak first, and then anyone wishing to speak in favor, and then we'll allow the other side for 5 minutes. So, would you like to speak now? Okay.
Could I ask a process question?
Yeah.
Is our only issue to decide whether this is active and not whether we would recommend a different thing today were it inactive?
If you find, your first question is it active or not? And that's the only question you have. If you find it active, that's it, period.
If you find it inactive.
If you find it inactive, then you consider whether to make a recommendation for change.
Okay.
But if you find it is active, and that's what Brenda went through, the aggregation of actions and all that, then it's active, period, no matter what else anybody may want.
Can I ask you a dumb question?
Let me also just note, we have a new attorney, and she's provided some information. I just want to make sure that everyone takes note of the memo that she provided for you. Yes.
So the question for the public hearing is to argue whether it's an active or inactive PUD. And that's what the public is going to talk about today as well. Or are they going to talk about, or is it open, or is anything up for discussion?
It's a public hearing, so they can, as long as they don't repeat what one said before them, then they can say whatever they want to. But it's our duty to determine, based on what the staff has given us, if that is sufficient to show that it is active.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
This item is open for public hearing. Anyone wishing to speak, please come forward. Give us your name.
Good evening. My name is Bob Preston. I live at 2216 Nashboro Boulevard. Nashboro Boulevard is the thoroughfare that really has some play into the question here. I eat at McDonald's a lot. I don't have a McMansion, though. I just have a little townhome that's on the golf course, and I love my community. My community is getting together. We've got a lot of spirit going. There are a lot of things going for that area. It's coming up. What I'd like to do, though, is to state that I do not accept the judgment of this being an active PUD as the staff recommended. And the reason that I say that is because I heard all these people talk about wonderful things and that you take into consideration, like the power lines that go right through the middle of the property we're talking about, like being on the side of a hill, side of a mountain, in fact, there's no backyards to it, just falls down. And I just want to know if you would consider, the movement of a few rocks and putting in utilities that, by the way, had to be stopped because the company that was the engineering company, which is retained by the new owners of this, and I question them too, but the same engineering company has been put in place that had the engineering of the utilities that supposedly have gone through that have never been completed. Okay, they haven't been completed. They had to be stopped. And the reason they had to be stopped was back in 2006, the Colonial Pipeline, was broken at that point by their construction company. There has been nothing done there of any substance at all. There couldn't be to that point because this property has been in the courts for a while. Now, when you talk about what work has been done there, I don't know, does, cutting down some weeds at the last minute, does that constitute anything, going in by making applications back last year by a different company for something that'll go on next year by a company that hadn't even bought the property yet? I recommend that we...
I'd like to give my time.
Was that set on 2 minutes? Okay, your time is up.
Thank you very much.
You can't allocate time to someone else.
Thank you.
Was that his 2 minutes? Okay.
Can I not give him my time?
No.
But you may speak.
You can speak.
Just want to be treated the same way.
Hello, Commissioners. How you doing? Thank you so much for this opportunity. I'm going to make this really quick and fast. I hate that 2 minutes been given to us and not enough time for the community to actually speak. I'm Vivian Wilhoit. I live at 1029 Flintlock Court. I live in Nashboro Village. I am a vested interest. I have a residence there, and I have a very much vested interest in reference to what's going on in this community. On April the 9th, we received a letter from my council member to state that 10 days later, when the letter was written, March 29th, to tell us that this is about low-income housing and that we cannot talk about it. This is not about low-income housing. It's never been about low-income housing. It's been about density, density, density. I have come before this council a number of times. Let's think about the issue about continuous building and finding a balance that recognizes the rights and privileges of not just the developers, but also of the property taxpayers that live there. In the past, I have come before this council a number of times. I have come before you on the Hamilton Creek, you voted against us. I came before you on the Weatherly Ridge, you voted against us. I came before you on 2 Nashboro Village sites, one of which your recommendation came from the staff to approve it, and you voted against us. We've been talking about density, and that's all we've ever talked about. I also take issue with the fact that in 2005, we had the opportunity to come before you and make this change. Please, we came before you on 200-unit development on 4 occasions, and you voted against us. Around the corner is a 73-unit lot. That is less than 200 units. By the time you had beat us down by turning us down on 4 occasions, telling us no when we were talking about density, for us to come before you on 73 units, we just felt like we just have to work with the developers. What else are we to do? How are we going to believe in our planning commission to say that you're going to vote with us when on 4 occasions you vote against us? So I take issue, Mr. Rick Bernhardt, for anyone to make that statement that because people didn't show up here and because of that, that's the reason why you move forward. You are the planning commission. You're supposed to look out for the commitment and its reference to preserving a lot of the assets in Davidson County. That is your job. If you saw a reason that this should be reduced, you should have also took that initiative as well. I say that we should be opposed to this legislation. We should take it back and defer it so that we can have a meeting with the community, with the new owners, and reduce this down to where there's only 28 development of the lots that's there. That property is inactive, and I oppose to this, and I take offense, Mr. Rick Bernhardt, and anybody else that's made that statement about 2005.
Thank you.
I take offense. I protect my neighborhood, and I work for it. I want you to know that.
Well, I don't know if I can follow that. My name's Vicki Tatarin. I live at 2510 Sleepy Hollow. I'm adjacent to the property. I get the traffic from that area. Much has changed since 1979 when the pub was approved, and even more has changed since 2007. In the last 5 years, the property values in zip code 37217 have dropped 47.9%. That's half. While the rest of Nashville has increased 4.5%. That comes from Trillia real estate market. The reasons for the decreasing values include poor infrastructure, too much traffic, too many apartments, not enough recreational space. I was at the update of the Antioch Priest Lake Community Plan the other night. On the housing board, the comments were upscale housing, no more apartments, no more townhouses, no more congested subdivisions. This has been a problem in our area for a long time. We don't need any more increase in the population density until we've solved the problems in this area. I have been by this area that has been developed. I see no substantial change. If there have been changes and the site has been active, they have been very low key because I have passed it at least 4 or 5 times a week for the last, several years. I see no difference. Maybe some permits have been, applied for. Is that really a substantial change? I've not seen any change in what is at street level. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
My name is Linda Hill, and I am a new resident to Nashboro Village. For many years, I have traveled from another state up here to see my daughter and have admired Nashboro Village and the way it's laid out. And probably because it surrounds a golf course is the reason why it has been so beautiful. Now I am a resident of Tennessee, and I'm a resident of Nashville. I'm a resident of Nashboro Village. I live in the very first unit of Fairway Villas, which is at the bottom of the hill from the golf course. And these townhomes are going to be smashed against the hill, up beside that hill where there is no backyard, up against that hill, 73 units between my house and the golf course. They're not going to be very big if there's 73 units because there's not enough room there. Have you been out there and seen the site? You need to go look at the site. And there has been no infrastructure since 2006 on that property. I lived there 2 days ago. They came and cut weeds. And I'm not sure who was cutting the weeds, but there was somebody up there cutting weeds 2 days ago. That's the only thing I've seen, and I've been living there since last fall. Haven't seen anything done out there. So I don't think there's been anything there done in the last 12 months. When you smash 73 units up against each other along that road, that narrow road going up to the golf club, and these units are going to share the same entryway that we do to our units and to the golf club. Where are they going to have their outside residential? In the previous discussions, we heard quality, not quantity. Well, in this case, the developer wants quantity, 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 and he doesn't care about whether the residents of that development or the residents of the rest of the neighborhood have any quality of life. He just wants to stack them in there and rent it as many units as he can and get some subsidy from the government while he's doing it.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Hello, my name is Jacqueline McCoy, and I live in Nashboro Woods. Thank you for allowing me to speak. One of my concerns, the developer has not presented anything to us. I was listening to the other developers presenting to the people who were here before. We know nothing. We know absolutely nothing. Just the fact that they are going to place 73 units up there. There's no recreation provided. And I'm going to ask you, how many of you guys actually live in District 29 or in Nashboro Village? None. Okay, I understand. Mr. Bernhard, I understand that you live in East Nashville, and I understand what's happening in East Nashville. I'm from a major city myself. I understand. How would you feel if I came over and tore down historic housing and you not even have an opinion to state on it? This is not for us. We as homeowners who have invested 20 years of our savings in this area has gone down. The property value has decreased tremendously. And I understand because this area has turned to be a dumping ground. The mayor came in 2008. His comment was his aide was concerned because he was coming to the Antioch area, which is not even Antioch. We had a meeting with the policemen several weeks ago. You know what their statement was? After they have moved the people in the area, this have became theft heaven. So the crime, the recreation, where will the kids be? The developers do not live in our area. They are not concerned about us. What do? Walk away just because we have had foreclosure? Foreclosure has been all over Nashville, all over Franklin, Belmead. Do you dump places in those areas? No. Please be considerate of us as homeowners who are fully invested. Thank you.
Anyone else?
Hello. I kind of want to piggyback on some of the things that have been said. We as the residents, I'm a resident of Nashboro community, and
Would you please state your name?
Sam Neal.
Okay.
And I first Can my time start? After I say my name? Okay. I first heard about this February 25th on a Facebook post. And what we were told wasn't very much. Our councilwoman said she would look into some things. And if you want to know why there's not a lot of people here, it's because there hasn't been any communication. There hasn't been any notification as to what's going on with our community. We've had to piece together this information, and what we've been reading we don't like. We were told that this is low-income housing being put here. That's not consistent with where we live. That is not what we want. That's not what the community needs.
The price point is not something this
I understand.
The commission takes into account.
I understand. That's what we were told. I'm just communicating that to you. And there are issues with this layout, the sloping and grading map. I didn't see that put up, but there are areas there that are over 25 to 30% slope. Given that is unsafe for any type of mowing, anything like that, but also it's unsafe for houses to be put there as well. That needs to be taken into consideration. There's one road that this property will share, which goes up to the golf course. That's not safe for whoever is going to live here, with the cars going up and down the street. So I would love you to take consideration those things, but to piggyback off of what Commissioner Cummings said earlier, is Greater Nashville is not asking for this type of development, and neither are the residents of Nashboro. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else?
Thank you for letting me have this time. My name is Elizabeth Hembry. I live at 1151 Nashboro Boulevard in Fairway Villas Townhomes, diagonally across from where these units are going to be. I don't want to repeat everything everybody said, which is true, that what everybody has said is coming from and said. We know very little about this development. The one thing, and we've not had proper communication for this development. We also have not met with developers on this development. We know very little about what's going on with this. I do know, as long as I've been there, and I've been there over 5 years, going on 6 years, I do know there are gas lines under part of that property. I do know that's why they can't put as many buildings there as they would like to. That was my understanding from when they first wanted to build there. It was because of those gas lines. I would appreciate, y'all, I know none of y'all live there. You need to look at that property. It's not been developed any. It's the same. I've been there almost 6 years. There's nothing been done to that property. Nothing. They've not done anything to it. And I would appreciate if you would, we would like to meet with the developers. What they're planning that we know of, it's not going to be right for Nashboro Village, and it's not going to be right for us. I do not want to see my home depreciate anymore. Thank you.
Thank you.
Hello. Thank you so much for allowing us to speak. I'm Jo Beth Hastings, and I live in Nashboro Woods. We have a wonderful community, a very organized community that has a master association, and below it has 9 sub-associations. We are very focused on looking at and controlling our community. We would just like to have you acknowledge and appreciate and respect us and defer this ruling until we can have a community meeting. We can hear from the developers. We can talk to our other residents. We can become educated, informed, and we can make some recommendations ourselves. Please defer.
Thank you. Anyone else? Karen.
Thank you, Commissioners. Again, I want to make a plea to please honor my request. I have utilized all of the communication vehicles that I have access to. to communicate the information that has been provided by you. The report was issued on Friday afternoon. I'm a new council member. I have to have time to look over the information and read it and understand it. Many of the staff and Public Works can share with you that I have asked a gazillion questions. I have spent over 40 hours over the last week, if not more, and everybody here knows that. I am really trying hard to get information and to work with you, Rick Bernhardt. It's very disheartening for me as an elected official to be accused of not communicating to my community. But traffic, Ms. Brenda Bernards, the front desk of the planning staff, Mr. Bernhardt, stormwater, everybody knows I have talked with the attorneys. I have had countless meetings with many different people. This is a very complex procedure to understand for a lot of people in the community. And so I need your help. I'm asking you for your help to give us an opportunity. I'm not asking to hinder the developer in any way. What I'm asking in this process, what I'm merely asking for is what any other council member asks for, and that is an opportunity for the community to hear what is being proposed, to ask questions, and to get feedback from planning, which you have done up to this point. And what I have obtained from you, I have shared by Facebook, by email, by blog, by every communication vehicle that I have access to. I would like to ask a couple questions of the staff with regard to just the process, Ms. Brenda. One of the questions is, there was an issue with the traffic study with the prior approval for this development. Can I have some answers to just around that issue so that people can understand how that was factored in? The first question is, when is a traffic study required for a new development and for a comprehensive large-scale PUD?
Generally speaking, that happens at the initial approval process for a development project, and the parameters that define what generates or warrants the need for a traffic study are outlined, I think, in the zoning ordinance. And there are parameters related to the number of residential units and square footages of commercial units, but it's typically done at the onset as part of the approval process.
No, 1979.
Correct.
The second question is, was a traffic study initiated by the council member in 2005 when the project for Glencrest, now named Nashboro Village Townhomes, was presented and proposed? And would this have changed anything?
To my knowledge, there was not. The Department of Public Works generally places a requirement for traffic studies, and one was not required because the proposed project complied, generally speaking, with the approved PUD. And so it was considered that impacts had been addressed through previous improvements.
Was a traffic study initiated by the council member in 2008, and would this have changed anything?
To my knowledge, again, there was no request for a traffic impact study at that time. And Not on the part of the Department of Public Works.
And was a traffic study initiated by the council member in 2012, which is myself? And would this change anything today?
Not to my knowledge. I mean, we did not place a requirement for a traffic study on this simply because it was a reevaluation of an already approved PUD that complied with the conditions.
So would I ask the question, then that response is what you provided?
Correct.
Okay. Again, there are a lot of unanswered questions. I'm not asking for anything outside of the process. The process gives us until May 30th to make action on this recommendation from the planning staff. And all I'm asking is for a 2-meeting deferral so that I have the opportunity to let the community meet with the developer. And I have called the developer, and we do have a community meeting scheduled for Monday, April 30th at Smith Springs Church of Christ off of Smith Springs Road. So I have spoken with the developer, and they have agreed to meet with the community on April the 30th. And that still gives us plenty of time to come back to the commission for you to act upon any recommendations. But from that, we can at least give the community the opportunity to ask questions and to obtain additional information. Thank you.
Okay, the representative of the owner would be now be allowed 5 minutes.
Mr. Chairman, members of the commission, my name is Tom White. I represent the property owner in this case. Along here today is Danny Womble, who's been the engineer on this project for a number of years. There's 2 issues before the commission today. One is, do you defer or not? And the second is this project active or not? That's the totality of the matters before the commission today. Now, with respect to the deferral, let me deal with that first. There has been a request initiated by the council lady in this area to have this PUD reviewed. My client made application for the building permit process in December of 2011. At that time, as the staff commented, not only did the application come in, a number of the agencies had reviewed it and basically signed off and approved it. This suggestion that we had at the time was not only consistent with the PUD, it was consistent with the final approved site plan. As indicated, once the application for the review came in, everything's frozen. It stops. Here we are 4 months later, still in a posture of waiting to move forward with the building permit. There, as indicated, are a number of agencies that may yet need to be responded, but again, at the front end, it was the normal process, consistent with everything, consistent with the approved site plan that moved forward. I want to ask you, what's the reason for the deferral request? The deferral request, when the only issue before you is it active or inactive, is so that they can have a community meeting. I have a great respect for any community. They certainly have a right to communicate. And I heard for the first time from Council Lady Johnson that apparently somebody with my client indicated they'd come to a neighborhood meeting. That's fine. We clearly are not agreeing to the deferral. We want this matter acted upon today. I think we're totally justified in asking for the approval today. Again, if the issue is it active or inactive, the point of having a neighborhood meeting to vet the project really is meaningless to that key issue, which is the only one before you here today. Now, I'd ask you also to consider that with respect to active or inactive, we've listened to a number of persons come to the mic. There have been some general statements about why people felt it was not inactive or was inactive, as the case may be, but no facts as to what did or didn't take place. When the request came from the planning staff to my client, I responded in a letter of March 27, 2012. The staff has that information. They've very carefully addressed it before this group today. This commission has heard on a number of occasions the factors by which you determine whether a PUD is active or not. I don't ever remember a case quite as clear as this one with respect to a staff recommendation about being active. And I want to cite some of those specific matters. Attached to my letter of March 27 was an exhibit from Danny Womble and Associates. This documented activity on this site from July of 2001 through 2011. There was uncontradicted evidence that more than $1 million had been spent on this site. It included clearing, grubbing, grading, installing a roadway base, storm sewers, 2 detention ponds, sewer and water lines. There's been no dispute, but that infrastructure has taken place. You've seen pictures that reflect a number of these items. My client alone is one of the other categories. You're supposed to address what's been spent within the last 12 months. My client has spent more than $75,000 just in the last 12 months. Again, uncontradicted. My client does have some lending in this that involves the Fair Housing Act. That's clearly something we've been very open about. There's issues for all of us on that issue, but again, we've been very straightforward about our request and what we're looking for. I want to make the comment also, I found Council Lady Karen Johnson to be exemplary in her communication. I don't know what has taken place, but I think she's done an incredible job of digging into this, checking into it. I've got a lot of respect for her. I told her it's really simply an issue, Council Lady Johnson, is it active or inactive? There's no dispute it's active. The type of housing, the other matters on the property, whether people in the neighborhood like or don't like that kind of housing is totally immaterial. The key issue here today is it active or inactive? That's the only question. Having said that, I respectfully ask this group not to defer this matter and to declare it active. I don't think there's any other result that you could come with. Danny Womble, the engineer, is here with me, but again, by the very standards by which you look at these developments, active versus inactive, which is section 17.40.120, you hear it every time this issue comes up. We meet it dead on. It's unavoidable. We respectfully ask that you, again, not defer it and approve it at this time. We'll answer any questions, and thank you for your courtesies.
Thank you. Need a motion to close the public hearing.
Motion.
Motion second, close the public hearing. All in favor? Any opposed? Great.
Thank you, Chairman. First, I want to say that I really appreciate, I respect the neighbors, the council lady, the former council lady. So I guess my first question is for staff. Why did the staff determine that it was, well, number one, did the staff determine that it was active?
Yes, we did. As I said, we made a site visit, and we saw evidence of the water and sewer plus a fire hydrant. There were utility boxes on the site, and that the documentation provided by the property owner also listed those items and other activities that are ongoing to prepare the site to continue the development of this property. And this property also has final site plan approval from the Planning Commission. I believe that was in 2008. And so it's moving forward and now is frozen while this review is taking place.
Thank you. So I guess my next question would be for the attorney. Our only discussion here then today is to really determine if it is an active PUD or not an active PUD.
That's correct.
And so, okay. Okay. Well, these are my thoughts with all that said. Unfortunately or fortunately, however you want to look at it. Well, now I have one more question. So what determines, what body of law determines that is the only thing that we can look at today? Is it our own rules? Is it state statute?
This is an ordinance the council passed. This is based on an ordinance the council passed that outlines specifically what the commission is to look at.
Okay, and then I guess I have one more question, is that for either the director or for legal, is that once you purchase a property and go through certain things and you start developing a piece of property, does state statute vest those rights?
If there has been substantial construction on the site, then a court could find that there are vested rights. There's no clear guideline there's no bright line rule as to what it is, but a court has to look at various things. Some of the things that they would look at is what the level of construction has been that has taken place on the site. In this particular instance, you're governed by the zoning code, which specifically lays out the criteria that you have to look at and evaluate to determine whether or not it is active or inactive. And that's going to be under 1740.120H3 subpart A.
Which is in the letter that you
That's
had
exactly
submitted
correct. So
to-
those are the criteria. You have to make an affirmative finding on each one of those to declare it inactive. Okay?
Well, I mean, honestly, I think that it's clearly, with the evidence provided here, that it's clearly an active PUD. I don't see that there's any legal authority that we can't approve it, and I don't see any reason for a deferral. That's my thoughts on the subject.
Andre?
I want to see that, I want to be sure that we're clear with the way we're explaining this. When did this owner purchase the property?
Yeah, great question.
I don't know if that's totally relevant. I just want to ask the question.
According to the details that the applicant, or the property owner gave, it was February of this year.
Okay, so, but what they purchased was a piece of land that had certain entitlements on it.
That's correct.
And the things that are invisible to any of us are what applications are being made or approvals by departments are being made that we're saying do determine activity because it's about the process of development.
That's correct.
And engineering studies.
Yeah. That's the aggregate of activities you can consider, and there's also those 3 tests about that if they meet one of those 3 measures, then you can also declare them active. And in this case, there is infrastructure for the development of this project that has been installed. And the code doesn't talk to when it was installed or who installed it.
But so it's been developed, it's been brought to a certain level of development, and so therefore it's active.
That's correct.
Just to clarify, this piece of property is ready to pull the permits for the houses. It's they're parcel
That
ready.
far through the process of development and study. Okay. I just wanted to get some clarification. Thank you.
Phil?
I just want to say to the folks that are here, I appreciate your concerns. And if we were talking about a zoning or rezoning issue, then you certainly have some legitimate concerns that could be addressed. But I hope that you can understand from the previous conversation here between the commissioners and our attorney and our commissioner, our planning director, that our task here is to determine if this particular piece of property is active or not. And there is clear evidence that there has been activity that meets the criteria. And so we're blocked into a situation where we have a targeted decision to make, and there is no wiggle room in that.
Judy?
That's what I was going to say. It's already zoned. It is zoned R10. It's already been approved for the 73 townhomes. And legally, we just have to follow the letter of the law. And that's just to look to see if it's active or inactive. And that's all that this body can even debate tonight. And just looking, and I think Andre said it, some things that make it active won't show up out at the property site. Surveys, pulling legal documents and that kind of thing. Some things might. They may be underground, the utilities and that kind of thing. So based on what is before us and the ordinance, and I think we said this in the ordinance, in the law, it doesn't have a time frame, right? It doesn't say that it has to be.
No, the time frame in concerning activity is if you found there was no activity in the first 3, you can also look at what was done over the past 12 months, construction plans, engineering work, in addition to looking at those 3 measures. And in this case, one of the 3 measures is actually met with the installation of the infrastructure, and that
was done when?
I believe it was around 2008 is when it was started. I'm sorry, it was 2005 when it was started, but it doesn't, the code, my point is, and the question, to respond to the question, the code doesn't say when the infrastructure, you don't have to consider when the infrastructure was installed, it's the fact that it's installed. That's important.
And so those are the laws on the book that we
That's
are
correct.
bound to. Thank you. Thank you.
Stuart? Planning across the country has been criticized as being sometimes an impediment to the rights of property owners. And this is an example where if we did not approve the staff recommendation, we would be guilty of that. These folks who have come here to interrupt us, but nevertheless are going to listen to us, I imagine, they don't own this property. They own their property. They have a legitimate right in how their community is handled and whether it's safe and whether it's well managed and whether the laws are carried out. But as planners, we don't have the right, specifically under the specific of the ordinance we have, to tell a property owner they cannot continue to do what they're zoned to do. To me, it's a very fundamental thing, and I don't think I've exactly been on the property rights extreme of the debates between planners and property rights activists. But this is a pretty basic thing. They own the property. It's zoned for something. We have rules about when that right vests. We have a clear analysis from the staff, and there is really it's not really a very close question. So at the proper time, I'll be happy to vote for a staff recommendation that this is active.
I agree with the previous comments, and we'll make one statement, I guess, that really is the business of the council, not us, since we don't write the zoning ordinance. If someone would have put in infrastructure 30 years ago, and then this came before us now on the question of whether it was active or inactive, our ordinance doesn't address when that infrastructure is. So is the intent of the code achieving the desired result necessarily is a question that I might just pose. Again, it may be a question for council, not for us. But the fact is that infrastructure was put in place just a few years ago, and because of the construction that's taken place and the aggregate of actions, I'll move approval of staff recommendation.
I have one question. It goes back to the timeline, and I just wanted to ask about that. This 90-day timeline question of whether the timing needs to be decided tonight or tomorrow or yesterday. That 90-day period.
Yeah, that 90-day period is for the Planning Commission to make your decision, to hold your public hearing and make a decision, a recommendation to council. If you don't make a decision in that period, then the assumption is that you have said that this PUD should be reapproved, and it then goes back through council and through the entire planning process that would be involved to reapprove the PUD.
Staff did not feel there was any information or anything to be gained from deferring this. I mean, the reality is, has been said here, and I'll just make sure that it's on the record, that this property was zoned in 1979 for 78 townhouse units in this configuration at this location. In 2005, the Planning Commission approved a revision to revise this from 78 to 73 townhouses at this location in this configuration. In 2009, because they had a gas issue, when they were doing the infrastructure, they ran into the gas line. They came back to this commission and revised it to basically approve this configuration of these townhouses the way that they're being proposed today. The issue of zoning was made in 1979 and has been available to anyone who has lived in that development. We're at the very end of the development and a master development, and kind of to answer the timing of this, you've had a tremendous amount of infrastructure that you could rely on to service this development. Now, that some of that was probably put in 1979, some of it in 1980, 1982. But in addition to that, you've had a tremendous amount of investment just in this over the last 7 or 8 years in this piece of property and running the lines and all to that. And it's just, in terms of being fair, this is not a rezoning case. It's not a case where you're deciding whether the zoning is appropriate. You're simply, under the council's rules of looking at a PUD, deciding whether it's active or not. And I just want to make sure that's clear.
I do have one question. I'm just curious. We're looking at a piece of a much larger PUD, right?
Correct.
How does the ordinance, why are we not looking at the entire PUD? Why are we looking at a component of it?
You're looking basically at you have requests for the 5 areas that are not developed of the PUD, if you go back to the master plan. The other 4 areas, staff did not have any problem recommending deferral on because we don't believe that those are active. They're inactive. We've got recommendations on those. So, plus you don't have building permits that are being held up and money being tied up on something that, in our opinion, and obviously that's our recommendation, is clearly active based on the interpretation of the ordinance. You will have the other 4 areas to consider, which we don't think any of them are active. Whether or not you recommend them to continue or not, it's a different story that you'll have those hearings on. But you'll have those on May 24th, based on what you had today.
Okay, we've got a motion and second to find with the staff recommendation to find the PUD active. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries. Hunter, anything from the historic?
No report.
Mr. Ponder has left. No executive committee report. Anything from the council? Councilman Claiborne?
I'd just like to make one comment about our new legal counsel. The last time she and I spent any significant time in the same room together, she was in the 7th and 8th grade in my art classroom at Ewing Park Middle School. So it's good. She was a great student.
Thank you, sir. I appreciate that very much.
Does the fact that she took up law instead of art say anything about that?
Rick?
Just a couple of things. This is a reminder that your next meeting is on Tuesday, April 24th, not Thursday. It's on Tuesday, and that's because we simply couldn't read the calendar. We thought that last year's religious holiday was going to be the same as this year's, and it shifted. But nevertheless, it's been advertised and posted and all that, so we'll keep reminding you of that. Tuesday the 24th. Tuesday the 24th. Because we misscheduled. We thought Passover was on the 26th, and it didn't. Never mind. We were trying to be very attentive to that. Council, beginning in May, council public hearings will begin monthly. That will begin. We'll be there. East-West corridor analysis is in heavy work. It's going to be very intense over the next 12 months, or really over the next 6 months. There'll be a lot of citizen participation. One of the elements that are related to that will be the Midtown rezoning, and we'll be bringing that forward to rezone that property in Midtown. General plan update is semi-underway. My internal office has been moved. We're hiding it so that people can't find me. Doug's is easily available where I used to be, and ready and welcoming, and we're ready to welcome any and all guests to visit Doug. You can stop in any time, just like you did with me. It's just the same kind of. He's got the same open door welcoming policy, and I'm sure he wouldn't want to change that. The courthouse move will probably take part in the next several weeks. We are, though, Doug and I are in a, 30 to 60 day or so, or 90-day transition period where we're kind of shadowing and working together. And I'm not abandoning y'all for sure. Based on the work you did today, we're actually going to begin the initial community survey work over the next couple of months. We have started data collection. Cindy Wood's working on that. We're working on that. We have met with a number of groups in terms of the initial coordination. We're just starting that, including the Chamber of Commerce, the Land Trust, Livability Committee, Neighborhood Resource Center, Health Department, Arts Commission, MTA, and the MPO. And we expect to have a workshop sometime in May or June with representatives from Portland, Oregon, and El Paso, Texas, to talk about their general plan process. We'll do that with staff, and we'll make that available to the commission. Airport master plan's going. I want to say one thing on the Antioch plan update. We had a kickoff last week, and it was extremely successful. I was going to compliment Derek for him and his son being there to represent the Planning Commission, but he isn't here, so he didn't have to watch that on TV. We did appreciate that. But it was, this was done, I guess, last Thursday, and there were over 100 people, and I don't know if you recall last Thursday, but that was the severe thunderstorm night, and it was pouring, and we had a great turnout. A lot of activity. We have created the My Antioch website that's out there for people to provide comments, and a lot of activity going on. April 16th, we're going to have an economic development and retail center workshop with the community, where we'll begin to look at economic development and retail in the Antioch Priest Lake community area. On April 19th, we've got a hands-on design workshop to discuss the mall and the surrounding environs. It's going to be kind of the design shop. Our design studio will be setting up and working there on terms of different development scenarios. I will be attending the APA annual conference in Los Angeles and be doing a presentation on Nashville form-based codes and our community character manual, and then be attending a lot of things on the general plan. Also be attending the Chamber Leadership Study Commission and Transit Workshop. We'll have a presentation from Portland on their general plan to that group, and also we'll be in Eugene, Oregon on a BRT review that's similar to what we're doing on the east-west connector. I think last but not least, the fairgrounds plan is kicking off. It's going to be underway for the next probably 8 to 12 months. There's 2 phases of that project. One is led by CSL, Convention Sports and Leisure, phase 1 of the master plan, and that's going to look at the best practices for the state fair and year-round facilities, and also it'll include estimates of potential market demand, supportable program elements in size, and a measure of the benefits. They're going to also answer how would the best practices model play out on the existing fairground site or a hypothetical greenfield site. The second part of that, phase 2, is a different consultant. That's Edge, Planning, Landscape Architecture, and Design. And basically, they're going to use the information that the first phase does to develop the highest and best mixed-use plan for the fairground site. So we have kicked that off. Ann's leading that, and we did, I guess last week, y'all may have received an email that started that goes to all the names we already have. It was kind of a heads up that it's starting. So before they read that. Otherwise, I think things are going about as well as can be expected.
Good. Andre, you want to bring us up to date on your presentation? I think you put that off for next meeting.
No, I think there's a DVD that may be accessible to go with an urban agricultural presentation, and so we thought it'd make more sense to make the presentation once that's available, which will be in June. So we think an early meeting in June would be the appropriate time so that I can refer to it and then people can have access to it. So we're going to talk about the positive meeting that we had about urban agriculture in June.
Any other comments? Adjourned. Time out.